Okay, we are live broadcasting from Pitkin County. Tuesday, August 27th, work session. Staff community presentations is up first. And what we have, I think do we need a vote to go into a special meeting of the Board of Social Services?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and Board of Social Services special meeting, 2019 second quarter update. And Nan Sundin and crew are on deck.
Great, thank you. I think this is on, right? Is it on?
Red light?
If it's not, they will tell you.
Yeah.
Really? Yes, red
I'll
light.
call you Mike.
We're good. So I'm Nan Sundin, Human Services Director, and I'll let the team introduce themselves.
Lindsay Maish, Deputy Director, Human Services.
I'm Matt McGaw. I manage our Adult and Family Services for Pitkin County.
I'm Chad Fedowitz, Manager of Senior Services.
Sam Lander-Casper. I manage the Economic Assistance Department.
Great. So we have a little bit of a new presentation. Let's see how it goes. It's not going. Come on, move forward. I skipped one. There we go. Okay, so the law in Colorado requires the Board of County Commissioners serving as a Board of Social Services to oversee local social services that address economic assistance, welfare duties, responsibilities, and activities. And within that, the social services functions, Pitkin County provides economic assistance, veteran services, child and adult protection, and senior services. Then we have agreements with other entities. Garfield County provides for us child support services, long-term care support services, and then in-home childcare licensing. Northwest Colorado Council of Governments, NWCCOG, provides non-emergency Medicaid transportation, eligibility, and the provision of services. And then Goodwill, Inc. provides LEAP eligibility services. Those are, for the most part, are mandated services.
Can you just, so people know what LEAP means?
Low income energy assistance program.
Thank you. Energy
And
assistance.
so that's primarily a winter program that provides people with, subsidizes their energy costs. And so within this structure, generally, we're really lucky as a home rule charter county. Many counties, the BOSS meets monthly or even biweekly. Does that mean every other week? Biweekly. We meet quarterly because of the home rule charter and the way that our governance structure is. The county manager basically attests to our expenditures and payrolls, but we bring them to you all for final approval. And then we want to give you updates about things that, boy, I really don't like this thing. Why doesn't it? There. It's not moving for me. I like my computer better. So we recently met as a team to go over again the purpose of the Board of Social Services briefings, we're calling them. And it's primarily to assist you all in your statutory obligation to preserve and protect the resources for our most vulnerable. So the statutory obligation is to approve our expenditures and to approve the client payrolls, the benefits that go out to people for childcare and health and food. The other piece is to provide you with relevant and clear information so that as you go out to state meetings or regional meetings or even in the community, you have the right information that will help you all make informed decisions. So that's our purpose. And it looks like a super long document. We're going to go over some of it today. And we've restructured it from being, thank you, that will help. Now I'm going to play with this. Okay, so instead of going department by department, we wanted to focus on your obligation to approve the financials, update you on any policy changes, program changes, any initiative updates, and signed contracts. So we'll try this format, and then you can tell us which one you like better, department by department or this one. But hopefully this is more comprehensive And we're hoping that the new format really reflects the unification of the efforts that we put into serving our most vulnerable people in the community. So we're going to start today with the financial reports. Because of the Munis switchover, we're not able to give you our expenditure reports. Couldn't pull the reports. So in the third quarter meeting, we will present to you in November the second and third quarter expenditures. So just a reminder that we present by quarters. We're a little different from public health, where they do a second quarter presentation and their Board of Health meeting is during the second quarter. We come to you after the second quarter because it takes that long to get the reports that we need, financial reports. So we can't do the expenditure approval, but we can do the payroll approval. So Sam's going to talk about that.
So what we're looking at here are the direct services payrolls for the programs that the Economic Assistance Department administers. So these are for benefits that are paid directly in customer benefits. This doesn't include administrative costs. And just a couple that we wanted to call out here, some changes that we've noticed. The Childcare Assistance Program has been paying slightly lower over the last 3 quarters due to some changes that we had brought here where we require child support enforcement as well as changing the income limits. However, we expect in the next quarter to see a substantial increase because the state changes to the income limits, raising them. We've seen about a 50% increase in caseload since then. That's anecdotally, but just from speaking with my staff, we've had about 12 more children added to the program since then. So looking into the third quarter, we expect to see those numbers going up. Just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
Is that on the upper chart, just to point that out? Childcare, so you're thinking it may go into the 60,000 range on that. Is that what you're saying?
I don't want to take an estimate of what we might be hitting with that increase, but historically we had been in the 60 to 70,000 prior to the changes to decrease the eligibility limits.
Thank you. And then your other one, food assistance? Oh, sorry. Excuse me.
With regards to the childcare, with regards to the policy changes that have affected the childcare payrolls, is the requirement that they enlist in child support services having the intended benefit that policy change may have intended?
So we saw some changes related to that. The intention is to bring in more additional support to the household to better support the children. So we did see a lot of households that hadn't been receiving child support enrolling voluntarily. We also saw some households that opted not to and decided not to enroll in the program.
And so they've forfeited their CCAP opportunity as well.
We can't say if they forfeited an opportunity since they weren't screened for eligibility as far as the income limits, but they did. Some voluntarily chose not to apply for child support.
And a reminder that families can be waived from child support if there's domestic violence or any violence in the home.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So just calling out the other change that we noticed with the food assistance, our food assistance issuance decreased actually to about a 2.5-year low at around 95,000 for the quarter. The interesting thing with this is our caseload didn't dip. So we're seeing the same, essentially the same number of cases. However, the issuance has gotten lower. We can't definitively say, but we noticed within our office anecdotally that people with the extended winter season, we saw people going back or getting laid off a little later in the season. Some folks were staying on at work longer than usual. So it generally reflects kind of an increase in income for folks who are still eligible and their income didn't go up enough to drop off the program, but it did decrease the benefit amount that was being issued. So we'll see if next quarter if we bounce back on that as we went in and through the slow season.
Be interesting to monitor that just because it's like the weather effects, and financial, right in front of us. It's kind of an interesting thing. A weather anomaly or a strange year can do that, I guess.
So interesting because the year before, where we didn't have snow until January, we had higher
Right.
SNAP rolls. So it
Yeah.
does. We're really seasonal.
We remember that, yeah. So interesting to see. Okay.
Any other
questions?
questions? I just wanted to add one other thing in terms of child support. I think there are only 6 counties that don't require child support for the Child Care Assistance Program. One is Eagle. So we were and we would love to have no barriers to childcare. But given the need to support families and children, we thought that this was a good step to take as well. You all changed the eligibility, which now we don't have control over. But, so far, when people choose to drop out, there are other options for them with Kids First. Right?
Steve,
In the SNAP program, given the federal government's.
your mic on? Yeah.
Yeah, it's on.
Pull it up a little closer.
Given the federal government's plan to cut the amount of SNAP benefits in the farm program, when do those cuts start? Have they started already?
So there's a couple of things with that, with SNAP that we're talking about. Those cuts are still technically in the, they're taking public input on those rules. And what that's going to do is it's going to drop the eligibility limit, which is currently at 200% of the federal poverty level, back down to the original levels, which were 133%. What we're going to see with that is that the way this helped people was there weren't a lot of benefits for the folks who were between the 133 and the 200%. What it did is it would give them a minimal benefit, but in some cases where there's people who are eligible for free and reduced lunch, that would automatically guarantee them eligibility in that program. So the overall impact in Colorado, I think the numbers they gave us for that were around, I had it in here somewhere. 33,000 Coloradans and 17,000 households. However, in Pitkin County, I don't remember the exact number, but the economic impact here would be around $20,000 of people of those SNAP benefits not coming into this community. So it's an impact on the folks who are receiving assistance, but it's not a large portion of our SNAP recipients here in Pitkin County. But the way that the state presented it to us is that these rules are going to take effect. We're going through the motions of taking information, but they said the likelihood that the consumer input's going to change anything is very small. So we should expect to see that change in 12 to 18 months, I think is what the state had said.
And I don't exactly understand this. I'm not sure anybody does, and how it may or may not affect us. But with some of the recent talk about immigration issues at the federal level and how it's going to affect, I believe it's green cards and people's ability to, or is it people's ability to pursue permanent residency in the country if they have been receiving benefits? I know we heard about it before. It kind of went somewhere, and now we're hearing about it again.
Right. And if you all approve the payrolls, we'll talk about public charge. How's that? Because it's a bigger topic.
I just want to make sure we don't.
Yeah.
So we're done with payroll. Let's move on. Then we
If you don't have any questions about
I
payrolls.
need a motion to approve payrolls.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. So we can start with public charge. Sam, you want to talk about? We talked about the SNAP rules, so.
So what's going on with public charge now, the information we've received is that beginning October 15th, anyone who is applying for their green card or looking to get citizenship, so for legal permanent residents, this is who this applies to, anyone receiving SNAP, Andy, you remember there's 2 other forms. There's HUD, certain forms of HUD assistance. I don't believe it's TANF.
No, I don't.
Another federally funded program.
And the good news is that there's a substantial portion of federal programs that this doesn't apply to. They specifically called out SNAP, certain HUD housing, and one other program that I can't remember right now. It will be considered in their application for
Medicaid,
citizenship.
is it?
It's not Medicaid.
Not health.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I'm going to look
So that
to
will
make sure.
prevent, will disallow them from pursuing those opportunities, correct?
So they are not saying that it will disallow them. It is going to be considered in their application process. And the good news that we got clarification of, it does not expand to household members. So if a parent is a legal permanent resident and their child is a citizen, if that child receives public assistance from SNAP or the other programs that they are considering, it won't apply to the parent's application for citizenship. So it's realistically only if the parent is receiving those benefits for themselves, which after they've reached their 5 years as a legal permanent resident, they are eligible to apply for food assistance and Medicaid and other programs. So it doesn't mean that the children have to be taken off of the assistance if the parent's concerned about their immigration status.
So the
It
threat
actually is
there
it
again.
is Medicaid.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
So
threat
it's
is there
SNAP and
again, but at a
Medicaid.
different level. But we don't know the definition of how it's being, of the word considered.
No, and I think that
What does that mean?
can possibly be good news because it's maybe in a different situation. It won't be considered as strongly as it likely will now, but people have to be aware that yes, it definitely is being considered in their application for
Well,
citizenship.
and I think any way of, resolving any fear of threat in that is going to be difficult.
Yeah, we've already had families drop out, and so as soon as the rule changed, like Sam's department started getting calls the next day.
That day that the
That day.
article came out, we were getting calls.
Families that don't want to lose the opportunity for legal residence by supporting their families.
So that means in this interim, whether or not they'll be able to even pursue legal residency is in
Right.
question also.
And so does that mean they're looking at them concurrent with their application, or are they looking in the past and any time from their 5-year eligibility forward?
It's not retroactive is what the federal guidance has been. It starts October 15th forward. So,
Okay.
yeah,
So they're not going to look if they used assistance earlier this year?
no.
Okay.
They just can't be on it.
So we
when
may
they start
see
looking.
significant drops October 14th.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
This is awful.
yeah. It's awful.
Worse than awful.
Right. I don't know if there's any action that you can take. I mean, it's been established. I don't know if there's any
Maybe in
Writing to
2020 in
Yeah, there's a
November.
lot of elections coming up.
2020.
And it's a
Yeah.
Department of Homeland Security change, so it's essentially on us. There's no barrier to services. It's an optional thing. So there's nothing from the human services end that really
So
weighs
good
in on
news
that.
for us is that we have programs to reduce hunger in the schools and other places in the community, the food banks, the mobile food banks, and we have invested a lot in Mountain Family Health Center that takes people who are uninsured. So we have a safety net here, but it's still frustrating to not be able to maximize revenues for families to utilize services.
Just
Okay.
reminded me, at some point, we're going to ask for just a review on how Mountain Family Health is doing now after
good.
their establishment in Basalt.
Awesome.
And haven't heard much lately. So I'm
Good. We'll put that down for the third quarter, and we'll be able to report more because we're located there, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So I just wanted to bring to your attention, because I know that monthly you get, or now every 2 months, you're going to get the CStat report, which is the Colorado statistics. This is how we as a county get measured on deliverables for the state. And just so you all understand, that when the new when Polis came in and the new director, Michelle Barnes, came in of CDHS, they looked at CStat and wanted to make it sort of upgrade it to 2.0, make it relevant and make it useful for counties and have it be a tool that state and counties use together. And so the changes they came up with are that it's going to come out every 2 months instead of every month, which is especially good for us because our numbers are so low that sometimes 1 month can really put us off. The second change is that they changed their colors. So they stopped putting everything in red, which was so alarming. And then the third is that they're tweaking some of the measures. And I think they'll probably change the measures throughout the year, and they will notify us when they change measures. This is the Pitkin County June report. And so you'll see that we're mostly green, which is we met the measure. And then there's a couple of places where we didn't meet the measure, but it was because of months before, right? So you can see that we're doing pretty well. Whoops. Whoa, what just happened there? There, wrong button. So we're doing really well meeting the state measures. We compare ourselves to the 44 small counties, and I know that you guys get both of these, plus you get a big book, dashboard book, which explains the numerators and the denominators. Small counties have trouble meeting, as you can see, safety measures and some timeliness measures. So if you compare Pitkin to 44 other small counties, we're doing really, really super well. And
But they still
which is
have
why
the red down there, do not make the gold.
I
even though
know,
it's
we
gray.
need to tell them that.
They skipped that part.
Maybe they couldn't
So
make
everybody
it.
made the
That's
gold, there's
actually-
no red, so.
So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I know we talked about CStat in the last quarter. We don't need to keep bringing it up unless you see something that concerns you, but I just wanted to bring to your attention that the format is changing, and it's something that we watch every month, every 2 months, and we're accountable to a whole lot more than just those measures, but that's what they're measuring. Okay, so the Child Welfare Grievance Panel.
I can talk about that. We are at a point where we're ready to appoint new members to our Child Welfare Grievance Panel. And so each year we are required to send a report of any of the grievances that have been submitted to our county. And this is for our child welfare casework. And so we've submitted our report, and next month I'll have a resolution to appoint 3 new members of our grievance panel, which are typically 3 community members that work somewhat closely with children and families. And one of the members has to have a child themselves. So next month I'll present that to you.
We don't get any, we have never had a grievance.
I was gonna say, how many grievances in our report?
We've had complaints, but we've never had to institute the grievance panel. And families are told and they're reminded that they have a right to complain on 2 levels. One is about caseworker behavior or presentation, and that's what the grievance panel reviews. The other is that families can complain about a finding if they disagree with it, and then they go to the state to appeal that. So the grievance panel is really if the conduct of a caseworker is if there are complaints about that. We have a complaint process whereby we encourage families to talk to their caseworker, and if they don't feel satisfaction, they talk to the manager. And if that doesn't work, they can talk to me. I haven't reviewed a complaint in a couple of years, but sometimes they come to me, and we are obligated to investigate every concern that comes to us. So far, we've been really lucky to resolve it outside of a grievance panel. But if we needed to, the appointments that you make will be professionals who are aware enough of child welfare to be able to make a fair decision.
Yeah, we've been fortunate. There's only been a few minor complaints that we were able to resolve with families pretty quickly. So that's been the case the past few years for us.
If a grievance came up, or a threat of a grievance came up, or you're aware of it coming down the road, do you can you be nimble enough to put together this panel quickly? Like, how does that work? You know who it's going to be already, or do we have to select them, or do you select them?
The process outlines some timelines. So there would be 10 days for me to present a grievance for Nan. And then Nan would have some time to review that to send to the panel. And I believe they have 20 days for review, and then they make recommendations.
Got it. And do we have the panel in mind? Like, they're selected and they know who they are and they know what to do?
I have 3 people identified right now, and just going to confirm that and present that next month.
In a one reso reading, so we'll bring it to a regular meeting. But it will, we've had mostly the same people, so you're putting forward.
Yeah, the manager of our local Mine Springs office will be a part of that. We have a representative right now identified from Response, and
Kids First.
Kids First. Thank you, Nan.
Shirley Ritter.
Shirley's been involved with this in the past. So
Great.
Right.
any other questions about that?
Good. I keep thinking that Aloysius is going to complain one of these days about having to sit through these meetings.
It's really, really important for families to know.
Like recording or play, recordings of these when
Put him right to sleep.
Just turn on Grassroots TV.
You can have lots of video of that kid. It's really, really important for families to know that they can complain and that they have rights. And we spend a lot of time making sure that they know that when we're involved with families. So.
Great, thanks for that.
Families First Preservation Safety Act, and you will be tested on this at the end, if it's FFPSA or FFSPA or what it is.
Prevention Services Act. So you did not pass a test. I wanted to talk about, this is also child welfare related. Families First Prevention Services Act is a significant change in child welfare funding with the philosophy to try to help provide local services to children and families so that they aren't removed from their family setting, if at all possible. So right now, the state is working with counties to try to help with this implementation that's scheduled for January 2020. The significant changes in funding are really related to out-of-home placement and how the state will reimburse counties for these types of placements, and also how they will increase funds for use of evidence-based practices and services. And so locally, there's a few challenges with this as we're working with the state to understand how this will work for us and how we can use our funds. Primarily is working with our local service providers so that they are able and trained to provide the evidence-based practices that the state is identifying. I believe they've only identified 8 to 10 services at this point that would be eligible for the federal reimbursement. So that's going to take some effort on our part to work with our local providers to get them up to speed so that they know what services are reimbursable and that they can hopefully work towards being trained and licensed to provide the services that are identified.
Most small counties don't have these evidence-based practices. So we wanted to bring this conversation to your attention because if you go to any state meetings, you're going to hear about this. And the law changes in January. And at some point, the state has to figure out how they're going to reimburse for family support services in communities where there are not evidence-based practices.
So we'll be working and collaborating with our partners there. Another barrier that other small counties and our county face there's been a lot of court-ordered placements that are resulting in youth spending time in congregate care placements, residential style placements. And with this law, there's changes to how there's going to be a reimbursement for that. So that's going to be another effort on our team to work with our judicial partners and our local partners within our juvenile justice process to hopefully reduce the number of the congregate care placements that we're seeing. Our county, if you looked at the CStat report closely, we didn't meet the goal for the congregate care number. We're higher than the state average, or the state goal would like us to be. And 100% of these placements are being ordered by courts. And so our team is really trying to work with partners to gain credibility and present information to our partners so that they understand that these recommendations about placement aren't necessarily based on funding, but about how outcomes are related to these services. And we aren't seeing very good outcomes with children being placed in these institutions. Many of these children aren't establishing permanency with families when they turn 18. And so if they are in a residential facility and turn 18, if the court jurisdiction ends, often these children don't have a place to go. Or if they do, there's broken relationships. So we're really, really trying to change the trajectory of these decisions and how it impacts the children and youth.
Does this come from like our courthouse next door? So is there a
Yes.
conversation that we may be able to facilitate with that to find out why these numbers are increasing? And what about the in-school program? Are we finding that aren't we finding that the in-school support program, what's it called?
Aspen Family Connections.
Yeah, has been helping though to divert a lot of, or to coach, resolve before they family scenarios escalate to a point.
Yeah, Aspen Family Connections is a crucial partner in
Yeah.
providing our prevention services. So we really try to get out in front of these problems before it gets to the point where we're so worried about a child that we think sending them away is the right thing to do. And so, yeah, I think that's one thing right now that we have going for us is the establishment of Aspen Family Connections, and we have a pretty robust prevention program. So we can offer prevention services to 100% of the families that are referred to us, and we partner with Aspen Family Connections. So right now we're contracting with our local music therapist to provide services 1 day a week in the school through our core services plan, which I'll talk about here in a minute.
The other thing too is, isn't that the program that City of Aspen is looking at maybe using some of their tobacco funds for? And I think that'd be a great thing for us to support, because that program needs to continue and be well supported financially.
It's very successful.
Kelly?
Can you illustrate for me some of these 8 to 10 evidence-based services that?
Ooh, yeah, I'm not going to pass that test. I know motivational interviewing is on that list. There's
It's not, actually. It's not been approved yet.
Okay. That one's being considered. Multi-systemic therapy is on that. I think cognitive behavioral therapy is on that list. So a lot of
Pick them up, Nan won't know either, and we'll just.
yeah, I'll just start saying some acronyms.
Like that.
I could tell the look on your face.
But a lot of different therapeutic modalities are being considered right now, along with some early childhood interventions and things like that.
Thank you.
Could you,
We have a plan to move forward in conversations with the judge and our DYC partners down at Youth Zone, and we have to time that in such a way that it's not related to a case. So we're taking a breathing room right now, and then we'll be pursuing conversation with our partners so that it's not, so that it's not related to a specific case, but it talks about what does the judge need to feel that either the child is safe or needs to stay in DYC and not come over to social services for guardianship.
If I could ask, before we move on, give us an example. We can't talk about specific cases, but where do kids end up going? And how does the process work? And, clearly it's a problem. But nobody sees this. This is an invisible thing.
Yeah, each case is obviously unique, but a lot of times what we're seeing are youth that are 15, 16, 17 years old that have been placed on probation because of some violation of the law, usually related to substance use. And sometimes that includes them running away from their homes, not going to school, some problematic behaviors like that, high-risk behaviors, as some would say. And so when they're not being successful with their probation terms and they're going to their juvenile court, what has happened is that there's been some youth, a handful of youth, that just have had a real hard time following those, the terms of the probation. And I think that the juvenile justice system right now is at a loss on what to do when there's really not a lot of consequences there for some of these situations because they're pretty minor. And I think that the court sees treatment as the best option instead of a criminal punishment. However, these treatment options haven't been very successful from the past few ones that we've worked with. And so that's something that we're just trying to pass that information along. There's national research on the issue that we're trying to share with our partners as well. And so we'll continue that effort.
Are these treatments in-home or in the congregate care?
Congregate care.
So they'll be sent to a congregate care setting, a residential home. Sometimes it's a substance abuse treatment. Sometimes it's mental health and substance abuse. Just depends on the situation.
So does a lot of that stem from the fact that there's just a lack of consistency and support in the home? The parents know the terms that their child is supposed to abide by, but doesn't know how to keep their child on track with that, or maybe in some cases just says it's your problem, not mine, because I don't know how to deal with my own life right now. So we're seeing just a failing of the family institution itself.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. And so during the process, we try to collaborate with partners in Aspen Family Connections, and we try to have what we call a family engagement meeting to address what concerns there are, what the strengths are, and then we try to come up with supportive services for the family and link them to those services or help fund those.
It's a tough one.
And where's the closest congregate care facility that they'd be sent to?
Grand Junction has a couple, and the Denver area has most of them. So we typically use the facilities in the Grand Junction area.
There's also the Youth Recovery Center at Valley View.
Okay.
Which
So
we've been
that's
able to
considered
use.
Hilltop outside of Grand Junction. There's actually, there are rules where we're not supposed to place children more than 200 miles from the home. So we get dinged on that almost all the time because we don't have services here. And I think that part of our challenge, it's not all the court's failure or family failure. Part of our challenge is really tightening the safety net so that we can convince families and courts that we have in-home services that are strong enough to support children and keep them safe. So we work on that through the IOG, the Interagency Operating Group, and working with other agencies to keep trying to address any gaps in connectivity so that we can help keep kids safe here.
Got it. And Denver's within the 200-mile radius, right?
Well-
what do we call Denver? Is it highway miles or is it crow
It
flies?
depends.
Bird flies. I don't know.
It is highway. Well, it is highway miles.
It's halfway
Yeah.
house miles.
Yeah.
The Veterans Administration had that problem. They
For
were
the
doing
BASH
it by
vouchers, yeah.
highway miles, and the town of Nucla had people who were being excluded from veterans
Services.
benefits.
Yeah.
But if they drew an 80-mile radius around Montrose by air miles, Nucla
Yeah.
was completely in that air mile distance.
Right.
So
We
they
don't so
actually
much-
changed
we-
the rules to make it air miles and not highway miles.
We know that that's the rule. We don't adhere to it if it's the best placement for a child. But really, best placement for a child is in their home when it's safe. And the community could be doing more to support behavioral health issues so that kids can be safe in the home.
So when you say our numbers are higher than, what ballpark number are we seeing
So
in the system at like a given time?
I think what's our number here where
that
did
gives
I?
a rate per thousand.
Yeah, don't remember.
The next page.
Right now there's 3 children in care, and typically we average between, it used to be 0 for a long time. It averages between 1 to 4, I think, per year now. So that, for a small county, that's a significant increase. A lot of resources go to these cases that involve the county taking custody for placement. There's a lot of rules and requirements and traveling and visits and documentation and things for these cases as well.
How many foster homes do we have? in the county?
Right now, we're utilizing Garfield County foster homes, and we also work with the child placement agencies across the state to help us find those. I am confident that we'll have some homes here soon. We do have
Because we don't have people who've applied to
No,
offer
we
foster
have.
care?
we have people that are interested in foster care in Pitkin County, and I'm working with people to. Let me back up just a second. Our team is a team that does not have the infrastructure right now that are a staff person to go certify homes and then monitor and manage these homes on a regular basis. So we're looking at our options as far as contracting out.
Say,
Yeah, and so
IGA.
the state has a new liaison person that is really interested in working with Pitkin County because of the challenges that we've had recently. And so I'm optimistic with the support from the state that we'll hopefully be able to certify and manage a few homes here.
Great.
We've been working on that for a while.
I know.
We have been, yeah.
And I can keep you updated on our progress.
Whatever we can do to help with it.
Okay, great, thank you for that.
Okay, so program updates, switching gears. Lindsay, you want to talk about the expansion?
Sure.
You know, before you move on, I just want to flag, there's been a couple of legislative proposals that we've been asked to weigh in on at CCI that we should probably loop in with you guys, having to do with some of this Families First implementation and movement of children who are, you know, using Medicaid and how that affects kind of their access to Medicaid in the child welfare system. So maybe offline.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation at the state level about how to fund this, given that we're not going to have best practices or evidence-based practices, and the state is talking about using state dollars to cover the costs and creating legislation and trying to maximize Medicaid dollars. And so, yeah, why don't we can watch it together. There are also little rules about foster care, like driver's licenses and things like that. And we watch those, but we are less apt to weigh in because we have so few children that we would cover. But we'll keep an eye on that together.
Great. Thank you.
Okay,
All right. So we've recently expanded space with the Human Services team to basalt in what we're calling now the Health One space, meant to be a health campus. It used to be Connect One, which was I think an architecture firm that was up
Land
there.
planning.
Yeah. So we're now co-locating in that space with public health to be able to offer our services in all of the departments. So adult and family services, senior services, and economic assistance. And we're there, so we're there 3 days a week, and public health is there 2 days a week. We'll be there on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays, and each of those days a different department will be located there. One of the reasons that we see so much value in this is because we're directly above Mountain Family Health Center. It's allowed us to start a different kind of partnership with them and be collaborating with them. We've already met with them a few times and starting to identify kind of key players for us to have contacts with there and understanding their processes as well as them understanding ours and what we can offer there. That was really the foundation when we got there. So that's pretty exciting. We also are, at this time, in the midst of a renovation at the Human Services building, where we will be co-located. Administration of Human Services and Public Health will be co-located in one kind of open office setting. And that broke ground on August 5th. So the renovation is happening right now. And we're really hoping that what this will allow is for us to just work closer with each other. There's a lot of overlap in our two departments or our two divisions. And both the efforts of what we do and what public health does, if we're all in the same space, we believe is going to really help us just to be more open with one another. And that's it. Oh, it's supposed to be, I think Jody said 3 months, the project.
Finishes in mid-October.
It
2.5
finishes,
months.
yeah.
And it's our understanding this is the last renovation of that building, John?
Till when?
I recall you saying that, but I did not recall
Oh,
that.
I said that will be the last. And a correction, you're actually directly over the whole palace, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's not directly
We're
over
near
Mountain Family.
Subway and
Yeah.
Stubby's, so
Yeah,
we probably
we're-
could say that
yeah.
co-location there.
We're very proud of that, our tenants in that building.
Yeah, and you know, while we're all joking aside about the remodel, that is a challenge in the building, and I think this is a good experiment right now to see if this space in 123 Emma Road, as they become available, may be put to a county purpose to provide some relief. Because one of the reasons we are constantly remodeling is the pressures in the Schultz building have changed and grown over time, and we're always trying to squeeze a little bit more in and make adjustments. And so we're excited to see how this works, and if it's a service enhancement, and be able to make a recommendation to maybe reduce the number of those types of changes in the future.
Also, I just want to say that part of the renovation is we're giving another bathroom to the day center. So no, this is huge.
I know it is.
They sometimes in the winter have 25 to 30 people in there, and so we're taking part of our third conference room, and we're forward facing into the day center, a shower and a bathroom, and it's gonna, it's continuing to kind of band-aid the need for a day shelter, night shelter, but it's gonna be a lot better for the day center and their customers. So it's combination platter. So, Sam, you want to talk about veterans office?
Absolutely. So in July, we were fortunate to hire a new veteran services officer. His name is Brian Littlejohn. I wish he could be here today to say hi to everyone, but he's at the annual training in Denver, getting caught up on all of the systems and regulations and everything to help serve our veteran population. But he has been getting out into the public. I know prior to Brian taking over the position, even though it was funded for 21 hours a week, we'd only been able to really fill 12 hours a week due to some time constraints with Janine's position. However, Brian's able to commit to 21 hours per week. So we're expanding his office hours to 2 days per week, 6 hours on those days. And then the rest of the time is going to be focusing on getting out into the community, meeting our community partners, learning about different ways that he can help serve the veteran population here and engage the veteran population. So he's his background was with the Air Force. He was working in engineering, as well as involved with some flight activities. And he also has a background in financial management, which hopefully will be of some assistance to some of the customers he works with. So hopefully we can get him in here for the next quarterly meeting so everyone can meet him in person.
Great.
Yeah. I was looking forward to the Veterans Coffee and Donuts today because I wanted to meet Brian. Then when I heard he wasn't going to be here, and I figured he was off at training, so then I didn't make it in for the coffee and donuts either. But next month, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Steve, with more hours, you may get more coffee and donuts.
More donuts. Okay, great. Look forward to meeting him.
Yeah, I'm sure he's excited to get in here as well and get people's input on how we can expand the programming and make it more robust for our community here. All right. So I'm also going to speak about the Medicaid Utilization Expansion Program grant that we received from Healthcare Policy and Finance that administers the Medicaid program in Colorado. Essentially, this program is we want to help increase the utilization of Medicaid benefits. We're seeing there are plenty of folks in Pitkin County who are eligible and are receiving Medicaid benefits, but they're not utilizing those. We're not seeing the getting the annual checkups. We're not seeing people utilizing mental and behavioral health benefits or the dental benefits. So we think that and this is how we approached healthcare policy and finance, we thought that there's a possibility that some of this might be surrounding education about the program. We think maybe people don't understand how the program works. They might be hesitant to utilize their benefits because they don't understand where they're applicable. So this program is going to focus on initially gathering data from essentially focus groups with Medicaid members to learn what are the barriers, what questions do they have, and from that information, we're going to develop a curriculum we're calling for community learning sessions, where we go out and present to the public, to Medicaid members, about these barriers, ways to work around it, why it's important to utilize these benefits, the idea that getting in for these early interventions can prevent chronic issues later. So we're going to be working with a number of community partners. We're calling it the Medicaid, the Medicaid Utilization Improvement Team, which consists of a number of health-centered local partners here, and they're going to help us develop this curriculum so that it's applicable across, across the board, so that our members get a real clear view of how they can use their benefits, what there might be to look out to, how they can access these benefits. And that's essentially, the Medicaid expansion program.
So just a reminder that these healthcare policy and finance grants are July to June.
Mm-hmm.
And we've received these grants. This is our third year.
Mm-hmm.
We've been very successful, and it helps offset our operating costs because we're going to do the project anyway. So now they're paying us to do it, which is great. It's really about just blending and braiding our revenues and trying to improve Medicaid member health.
Mm.
So, any questions?
Just a compliment on your, well done on the grants.
Yeah, Sam, he's a good grant writer.
Thanks.
We did it in a week. We swear we're never going to do it again, and then we go and report out, and we're like, yeah, we could probably do it again.
Go, Sam.
Yep. Okay, so nutrition program.
Sure. So just briefly, here Senior Services provides nutrition and congregate meals, so meals served at the senior center, and then home delivered meals that we deliver out throughout the community. Those are programs supported both by the county and then state and federal funds. And so I like to share our meal numbers. What's interesting to note in this quarter and last quarter compared to last year is this second quarter is the first time we can compare 4 days of lunch served to 4 days of lunch served from last year when we started that. And so if you look at the gray lines, and the orange lines are grays this year and oranges last year. In the first quarter, we were lower than the previous year, and then second quarter, we either very close to the same or larger when we look at home delivered meals as far as numbers. Unfortunately, staff have tried to gather data of exactly why our numbers fluctuate. And we don't have a really concrete answer. We do know historically that the seasons, like the weather, do affect our numbers of travel of people in or out of town or just visiting as far as congregate meals go. And so it's really challenging to know or predict why we see certain trends besides now having 4 days of lunch, at least in both programs. And home delivered meals is very affected by people's health if they qualify for a home delivered meal, which means they basically have to be home ridden to be able to qualify in the strictest sense of qualifying, at least. So this, if you look at the second quarter for home delivered meals, it's quite a bit higher than last year. But anecdotally, I can tell you that third quarter will be lower because so many people are dropping off qualifying. Basically, what I like to say, graduating from home delivered meals, that they are doing well enough they no longer meet those qualifications.
Can you remind us, do the Redstone meals fit in the congregate care?
Sure.
Yeah.
So Redstone meals currently are not tracked on either or on this graph and that's due to Redstone meals are not covered by state and federal funds, so that's a kind of separate pot, if you will. So we try not to mix those numbers between, just mainly for funding. I could easily put all those numbers together, but for funding purposes, because these numbers are the numbers that we report back to the state, so I try to keep them separate.
I'd like to see those numbers from Redstone.
So in the memo, there's a
They are?
blue
Yeah,
chart,
blue
a
chart
bar
right
chart. I think it's
right
on.
in front of me right
Yes,
here?
that one right there. That shows the
Could we go
total.
This one up here.
That doesn't show necessarily meal numbers. That shows total participation
In
of
programs.
all programming that happens in Redstone. I do have the meal only numbers, just not in the memo, but we are tracking that as well.
Well, February was so high.
Snowy, cold day.
Yeah.
George?
Hi, Chad. I was up at Redstone a couple nights ago and talked to a few people, and they were really pleased and thankful about the programs up there, and they wanted to thank you for really getting that off and running, and it's been a real success. So.
Because they're very thankful and generous with their thanks when we're up there, and the different programs that we try to provide, and based off of what people are expressing they would like to see, or what we're able to do and be able to provide. So we're really pleased with the turnout and the response, and so we're looking forward to continuing doing it.
So how do we provide the meals there?
Sure, good question. So our department has worked with the Redstone Inn to negotiate a price of a meal, and we initially started doing kind of restaurant style, as far as here are your options and we'll help cover a cost. That wasn't working as far as sustainability from our perspective for the high cost of service in the Redstone area. And so we came back to the table with the Redstone Inn and negotiated a flat rate,
Like a menu, like
a flat rate for a buffet.
Oh.
Which would be a little more cost effective both for our client, for our department, and for the Redstone Inn, where it would work with a kind of variety of different menu options that rotate. And so currently, for a number of months, it has been a buffet with a set price. And currently, a participant pays $5, and then the department at the moment is subsidizing the rest within kind of our general operating expenditures, and that's how it's been working at the moment.
So do most of these numbers in your senior programming graph reflect on how many people actually have lunch there? Do you think it would be pretty close?
Yes, I would say so.
So we wouldn't,
Pretty close.
breaking it out wouldn't give us much more information then?
I would agree with that.
Okay.
I was just interested in knowing if you can give us an estimate. What's the cost of a home delivered meal wherever in the county?
Total cost?
Just wondering what how do you?
Well, the state currently the state determines what you would add all together. But they changed that. We don't necessarily look at that anymore. But in my best estimate, based off of last time we computed, around $50. Because it counts per meal, it counts certain staff time, it counts time to get there and back, vehicle costs, total food costs. So it's literally everything that goes into the making that meal, getting it there, and all that. So somewhere probably in the 50 or even greater dollar range.
But when you have volunteer drivers, they're not reimbursed for their time or gas, are they?
They could be reimbursed for their gas.
They could be reimbursed for
And
their
so even if they would ask no, historically we had to count that as part of the meal cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then regarding Redstone, if any senior shows up on whichever day it is it 1 day a month? Is that what you
2 days a month.
Bi-monthly.
Tuesdays, got it, okay. And if they show up and they're a senior, they can participate, or is it?
So currently, how we have it set up, which is worked rather well, or as well as our congregate site here in Aspen, we ask that people RSVP, and because two Redstone lunches happen on Tuesdays, we ask people to sign up by Friday afternoon, the week before. And for the most part, that's worked really well. And that's more because on Friday afternoon is when we give the numbers to the Redstone Inn so they can prepare and plan for those meals, just more a little space for a courtesy. And that's following the very same system that we use at the senior center, though it's a day ahead. And that's a requirement by the state that we have that kind of system. So we're using a similar model, even though it's not state funded, it's a little easier to manage. And if people call Monday morning, say, or show up on Tuesday, we just kind of let them know or remind them about the procedure and that they're more than welcome to have lunch at the inn, but not necessarily partake of the buffet. And with maybe one exception, it's never been an issue.
Got it. And then which Tuesdays are they?
Typically, it's the second and fourth Tuesday. It just depends how many Tuesdays there are in a given month. Yeah.
Excellent. Great. Good to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jed. So, haven't talked much about the Housing Stability Coalition, and I just thought I'd give you all a brief overview about what's happening, because I know that there's a lot of county conversation about housing. There's not a specific ask for you all to do anything. This is mostly just for your information. We started last October pulling together people who were interested in trying to address the issue of housing instability, which could be about homelessness, it could be about transients, and it could be about the campers who don't have housing or people who are in and out of housing. We have over 100 people on the listserv. That's a lot of people. They're coming from faith communities, from governments, from businesses, just community citizens, and some youth as well. We've had participation up and down the valley from Carbondale and Glenwood. Also, we had some visitors from Summit County who were interested in what we were doing. Mostly, this group has worked to try to create a framework for what services we would want to make sure we have to support housing stability, all the way from prevention to homeless response or emergency homelessness, supportive transitional housing, and supportive housing. So we have created a matrix. We've identified an inventory of what exists pretty much between Aspen and Glenwood and where the gaps are. And we've created task groups who are working on building those systems. In the last meeting that we had in August, so we meet quarterly, and there's a planning committee that meets monthly. At the stakeholders meeting, there was an effort to kind of prioritize the goals. And you'll see in the memo that the short-term priority goals are to expand and stabilize case management and mental health access. That was the number one priority. Second is to provide a safe, legal, healthy, and dedicated space for emergency shelter. The St. Mary's has agreed to run a winter shelter again this year. We're thrilled about that. They're negotiating with the day center now about what needs to happen. But it's a difficult for St. Mary's. They're a church. they want to preserve the integrity of their building, and as they allow people to come in at night, things happen. And so they're working with the day center to tighten that up, and but we really need to look at more of a permanent, maybe not year-round, but some kind of solution that allows for good case management, good services, and trying not to have people be in our emergency shelters for 7 or 8 years, right? That's not the point of an emergency shelter. And the last is to try to rapidly rehouse people if they lose their housing, if they're being evicted. So that also requires a lot of case management. The longer term goals are related to trying to permanently house all chronically homeless and all veterans homeless. Those are pretty standard goals for homeless initiatives throughout the state and throughout the nation. And what's happening at this point with these goals is that the committees are going back and working on an action plan. We're talking with Garfield County Homeless Coalition about a grant called Build for Zero, which is where we do something called coordinated response, and we evaluate and assess the people who are homeless and determine their vulnerability, prioritize them for housing, and then sort of one person at a time try to find housing for them somewhere in the region. We've gotten a lot of support from Garfield Housing Authority. KT is fantastic. And Betsy Crum from Snowmass Housing Authority, really excited and helpful. So we'll see if we get that grant. But that would be the beginning of us really having a regional conversation about this instead of just Pitkin and just Garfield. Is there anything you want to add about that? John comes to our meetings. Okay.
And I just want to apologize because, Kelly and I went to one of the meetings a while ago, and I just haven't been able to go because of conflicts with other meetings. But I appreciate getting the information, and I thank you for that.
So, it's hard because we meet quarterly, and so you can either make it or you can't. But the beautiful part, I think, is we have over 100 people on the list, and so we continue to educate and include and get new ideas, and our whole team sits on it, as well public health, and I think that we know that DOLA and other federal monies are coming down the pike for housing in a year. And Lindsay and I have gone to trainings, and we continue to go to housing trainings, and we know that we have to have a plan in order to even qualify, and we have to have community will and community momentum, and that's a part of why we're designing a plan now.
Great. George?
So, Nan, we have a sort of a ballpark number in terms of who we're trying to address, whether it be chronically homeless or that's
There was a point in time count that was done in January, January. And they identified about 50 homeless between Aspen and Glenwood with less than 10 vets. So the numbers are low here. That's chronically homeless. And we don't think that they counted everybody, right? Because it's sort of like who was counting. It's one day. You got to fill out a whole form. There's resistance to doing that. But that's the number that we have now. It's been a little higher in the past. We do point-in-time counts every year through the Catholic Charities.
So when you're looking at one of your goals in terms of your long-term goals in terms of permanently finding housing, what does that look like? I mean, is it in placement in homes? Is it building a facility?
Great question.
It's all those things.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not anything in particular, and I think that the more that we learn, like this winter, 3 of our chronically homeless went to Fort Lyons on the Front Range, right? Fantastic. And the connection to Phil Harrington, Deacon Phil at St. Mary's Church, who runs that place. It doesn't have to be here. And it, I think we've had a lot of conversations in the Housing Stability Task Group about our goal to end chronic and veteran homelessness and create a pathway to end all homelessness. Because what that means to us is we're not going to end all homelessness, but we want to create pathways. It might be to transitional housing, it might be to sober housing, it might be to treatment, it might be to an apartment. It could be a whole number of things, a whole range of things. And we want it to be available if someone is ready, if they find that they're completely ready to get off the streets. So it's a number of things. Would you add?
Yeah, it's unique. So of those 50 people that were counted as point in time, they all have very unique needs, and there's different reasons that they're all living homeless. So I don't think like a one size fits all, like putting everyone in one building would necessarily work. But that there are some people who are suffering with mental illness, and they might need a supportive permanent housing where there's a case manager on site at all times, and medication, a psychiatrist that comes once a week or something like that. And I don't know if that's here, but that there's a lot of different solutions along the continuum, and it's really just identifying where those are, what they are, and how we can use them.
And then, so out of that approximately 50 people, that number, how many do you have a number in terms of actually are working?
It's a great
Percentage-wise?
Yeah. We held a focus group where we had about 10 people show up of people who are living homeless, and all of them were working. So if that's a sample, that of 50, there was 10 that showed up. I think it's at least, we can make the assumption that at least 1 in 5 are working, and my guess is that it's higher than that. Yeah.
Kelly?
What's the name of the facility that
Fort Lyons.
Fort
on the Front
Lyons.
Range. I think it's
Okay.
in Bent County.
Yep.
Right.
We all want to go see
I
it.
remember hearing from the priest who, is a real champion of that facility. And one of the things that he said that stuck with me is asking clients, I guess, what's your go plan? And that sort of has framed the debate for me about this, or the discussion for me on this topic is about transitional housing and, case management and everything. Like, what is your go plan? Like, let's have this be a temporary situation. And, that stuck with me. I'm very encouraged that this church is continuing to sponsor the winter shelter. I know that,
Very
that's a really
generous.
stressful, conversation and thought for us to have heading into winter. So I just want to express my gratitude to St. Mary's parishioners for that. And then I understand that there was a proposal from the homeless shelter about a more permanent facility, and I just kind of want to understand what that process is for vetting such a proposal.
No, I want you to.
We don't need to go into details. I just want to acknowledge it's out there and sort of get an update on how that might
I'm waiting.
be handled. And
So that was presented actually at the last housing stability meeting. And the commitment that I'd made to the larger group, maybe ahead of you guys a little bit, was that we needed to kind of see where the housing stability group was going in terms of what are the priority issues to address, and then evaluate that proposal in light of those recommendations. The specific proposal is something that we will need to bring back to you guys, and I think to the neighborhoods that might be impacted by any such proposal. But I think we have a little bit more work to do through the housing stability group, so you can see where it fits into a continuum. I think one of the challenges that we've had in our conversations, our community conversations, is we kind of felt like the shelter was kind of the full continuum of services, and what we've learned is it's really a small percentage. I think that's been a learning on both sides, to be honest with you, and that there's gaps and opportunities that we need to fill in that may take pressure off of the day center, and it may change the scope of what's needed, not just the day center but the shelter, the scope of what's needed there and how you might address those needs. And so we did start this coalition and these conversations with the idea that the groups would have an opportunity to vet those ideas and make a recommendation. So we didn't want to get too far out ahead of that. But it is going to be coming to you. Frankly, we have not had a chance as staff to even talk about the proposal and understand what additional
I
questions
think
there might be.
you're planning a meeting with Dave Ressler
Correct.
to figure out the pathway.
Sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
And again, I do just encourage that notion of like, what's your go plan? Looking at one building, it doesn't get that sort of start to finish.
And in fact, the priorities kind of talked about things like case management and how do you provide the support so that folks can either be stable or in a housing situation, or have some support to take that next step in the GO plan, or first step in the GO plan, as well as how do we provide safe, healthy, and legal places for folks to be, and there's a whole continuum there also. So.
We know that in Summit County, a faith community has stepped forward and is allowing camping in their parking lot with very strict oversight. So that's one sort of rural resort solution. We just read in the paper, and I don't have details other than the paper, that the Eagle County commissioners are buying a building in Eaglevale for this sort of camping population that is there to work and doesn't have an affordable place to live. So there are opportunities, and as we continue to work with the county on other housing initiatives, you know, we'll hopefully be pulling it all together and having common strategies.
Yeah.
But it's exciting. I had a meeting this morning with Shelley from the Forest Service.
Grail.
Yeah, and we had a great conversation about how we can support her Forest Service workers. They're exhausted. They've been kicking people off land all summer. They're frustrated, and they need support. And we can also provide support to the people who they're rousting. So the more we talk about this, the more people want in, and they want resources to figure out what to do. So it's fascinating.
Speaking of that, did we hear anything more about the use of our
They-
funds for
The only thing
forest?
I heard from Shelley today is that the Forest Service backed off of the request.
Well, okay, just want, we can leave it at that.
Nothing new has come our way. I think there was some miscommunications or lack of communication happening in different silos of the Forest Service.
Well, you
so.
know, the LEO called me directly. And, yeah, and it was all news to him because he was just coming back from paternity leave. So, interesting. But it's good to hear about Summit counties and that trial program, and we'll have to keep an eye on that, see how it.
Yeah, see what happens. Right. So, Sana.
Yep. So we just wanted to give you a quick update on the Safe and Abundant Nutrition Alliance. Last time we were here, we had just raised some funding together from some of the participating organizations to hire a coordinator, and we wanted to celebrate some of the successes that person has helped in reducing food insecurity in the region. One success was a grant through LiveWell Colorado, where we were able to secure $26,000 in Garfield County and $10,000 here in Pitkin County, which provides CSA shares from local farms. They provides fresh produce to seniors and people who are eligible for WIC. So here in Pitkin, we've been distributing those vegetables at the senior center every Friday. On average, there's between 12 and 15 people who are able to get fresh produce for free, which has been great. Through the coordinator, we were also able to get a grant approved in Garfield County for $12,000 to help the Meal Monkey program purchase a new van. So that's out providing meals to kids at parks and stuff during the summer on Fridays. And we were also able to do a food rescue program for the Aspen Ideas Festival, and I believe Kira, the coordinator, said that they had received around 2,000 pounds of fresh, healthy, great, delicious food that was distributed between pantries from here all the way out to Parachute, working with local city markets to help store that food to keep it safe during the transportation. So the coordination with this group that's been getting together is really helping to have an impact on food insecurity. And we met just yesterday the SANA Advisory Board, which involves Eagle, Pitkin, Garfield counties, as well as Lift Up, Food Bank of the Rockies. I think that's everyone who was there yesterday to discuss about moving forward with this group, and we're working together as a team to develop a more clear mission statement and then looking at reaching out to the community at large to bring in some more support around larger projects moving forward. Right.
One of the things that we heard yesterday in that meeting is that Food Bank of the Rockies has received a grant to put a container in the Roaring Park Valley that would hold fresh food for this food rescue and gleaning. And they need to think about where they're going to put it. So as you're out there and you think about the container, it's kind of like a truck size thing.
So a refrigerator truck, essentially.
Refrigerator truck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's on wheels, or is it going to be dropped off?
I believe it's like a semi-trailer size that they would drop off. Yeah, so it would need.
Electric.
Yeah, probably 220. And then access, there needs to be, during business hours, someone that can provide access to people who would be picking up and dropping off food for storage.
Is there anything available at Cozy Point?
Cozy Point, good idea. Keep thinking.
Well, they have access, they have, and.
Who's the bus stop there?
Well, I was thinking the CSA too, are those our local, like, sustainable farmers, like?
So for the
Like
Pitkin
2 routes
shares,
and-
we went with 2 routes.
We need to thank you for them, for doing that. I mean, that's huge, stepping up to the plate for those young, hardworking, sustainable farmers, to be realizing there's that need in this community and stepping up to the plate on it. I think that's something we can talk about. I think that's amazing.
Do you want Sam to craft a thank you letter? Sam or Chad? I mean,
I would love to do that.
That's a great idea.
Okay, and then we'll give it to
Thanks,
John,
Sam.
and John can check it out with you
Okay.
guys. Okay? Great.
It's not noontime.
No, it's 12:20. It's good. We're
2:20.
220.
It's 2:20.
Starting over now.
20 in Alaska.
12:20.
I'm still on Alaska.
Thank you.
All right.
Ahead of schedule.
So the other thing we wanted to mention is the Colorado Office of Early Childhood sent out a strategic plan survey trying to solicit information from basically anybody who is utilizing childcare. And we just really wanted to get that link out to the public in case people want to participate in that survey, which I believe runs through the end of the month. And it's an opportunity for folks to provide their input on barriers to accessing childcare, what they'd like to see in childcare moving forward. So the state would really appreciate anyone who's,
End of this month or end of next month?
believe it was the end of this month.
So 2 days, 3 days.
Yes.
So hurry.
Posted it on our Facebook page and the
Yeah.
county Facebook page, and have done our best to get the link out to families, to Kids First, to childcare centers.
I'll see if my daughter has received it. If not, I'll get it to her childcare.
Okay,
Thanks.
any,
Like right now, I'll do that.
so the last page that we have, and if you have any other questions in the memo, feel free to ask. You all give me permission through different resolutions to sign in perpetuity contracts and agreements that come annually with John Peacock's signature. So, and I said that I would bring to you a list of what I had signed, so you know. So in the last quarter, I signed an agreement with Garfield County for the Community Services Block Grant. That's about $18,000 that comes our way that helps support our benefits outreach specialist. Alpine Area on Aging, Agency on Aging, that was an agreement that was just an amendment that didn't change any. Thank you, Aloysius. Didn't change any amounts, but moved some of the money around so that we could spend it. Sam talked about, well, we didn't talk about the healthcare policy and financing incentives agreement. So we're allowed to make some money from HICPUF that can be used any way that we want in the general fund or in the human services fund. To earn dollars for meeting timeliness or meeting collaboration expectations. We in state fiscal year 19 earned $7,710 through the incentives. We were just about 650 short from one of the measurements. So that was good, and we use those dollars to help offset our admin over costs, right? Some counties use them for parties and bonuses, and we're gonna try to get more creative. Just paying our bills is kind of boring, but that's what we do. There are some new incentives for state fiscal year 20. One of them, which is really interesting, is related to cybersecurity. HICPUF wants to make sure that where we keep personal files and personal information is safe. And their deliverables are not huge. It's mostly that we have MOUs and agreements, but we will be able to comply with that because our HS Connects contract with Arapahoe County already ensures the protection of personal information. So we feel good about that. Garfield County, we have an intergovernmental agreement for the Northwest Shared Eligibility Technician. That's in the whole 10-county region. We each pay $8,334. So that's a steal. We haven't used them in a while, but it mainly helps counties when they're understaffed manage the workload. Sort of like how Sam's team is doing for La Plata right now. Right? So that's a nice way to be able to help. And then the other we have a memorandum of understanding with River Bridge, and that's just something that we have to sign every 2 or 3 years with law enforcement about how we're going to proceed with child welfare cases that need a forensic interview. And the last is the core plan that I'll let Matt talk about, which is how we're going to spend our core allocation, and it requires a plan every 3 years.
Yeah, so I just submitted our core plan to the state, and you can see there that we had an allocation for Pickens County of 64,000 plus there. And so with this plan, this is an allocation to be used primarily for child welfare services for the families that we're working with and the prevention services. Excuse me.
Matt, while you're on it, just we could identify the acronym because there are so many different type of cores lately that.
It's really funny,
It's not an acronym.
Yeah. Well, it's capitalized like an acronym.
Is it good children of rural?
I don't think it's supposed to be
okay.
capitalized, but
I was thinking of the CORE Act or Community Office for Resource. I was like, what are we talking? Solar? Are we talking land use? Like, what's going on here?
there's 3 major allocations in child welfare. Core services is for direct services for families.
It's really about family preservation, so it's supposed to be core to the family. It's metaphor.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Pickens County is a part of a regional plan that does include Garfield County, Summit County, and Eagle County. And so we do have access to funds that are outside of this allocation, which is really helpful because there's a lot of substance abuse and mental health services on our substance abuse and mental health providers on our regional plan that we have access to. And so typically we're underspent on our Pickens County core plan. And so I wrote a plan this year to try to maximize more of the funds that are allocated for us. And so we did designate, we kind of split up our funding for different services. And we designated approximately 29,000 of that allocation to be used for staff time. There's different services our caseworkers can provide for families when they're working with them. That could be in-home services, therapeutic type services, safety planning, kind of parental support. There's also life skills and things that can be provided directly to the families they're working with. There's also administrative costs that we can count into this. So that'll offset some of our staff salary costs and allow us to provide direct services with the families we're already spending time with. So we feel like that's a good way to use the allocation this year. And the remainder of it, we do contract with local service providers. I did mention a contract we set up for a music therapist to be in the school 1 day a week. We have contract with alternative therapy providers, such as a canine assisted therapist, and we utilize the equine therapy services available in our valley. So we really try to use our Pickens County core plan to provide those alternative services that are outside the traditional talk therapy that not everyone is crazy about. And so we're hopeful this year to maximize more of that plan. Is there any questions about that?
Just a reminder that our child welfare allocation hit this. I'm in the mic as much as I can be.
Lights on?
It's on.
Sorry, guys.
We can hear it.
We hear you. We hear you.
There's something wrong with this.
Our
The
child
system's
welfare
been really
allocation
edgy.
took a hit this year of about 30,000. Our adult protection allocation took a hit this year, and so the core plan in particular, with the hit to child welfare, helps us to sort of backfill. Many counties use their entire core allocation for county funding to support staff. We have found that, as with all things, including the Healthy Community Fund, sometimes our partners do things better than we do. So we use it as a blend of paying for staff and also paying for direct services. Yeah.
Great, good to know.
Okay. So that's the end of our presentation, unless you all have any questions from the memo that we didn't address.
Questions, comments?
Just a comment, I like the new format. I think this has been a good discussion today.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed at everything that all of you are doing all the time to help people. And we really appreciate it, and I know members of the community appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. Nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. If you have any other thoughts about format at any time, we're open. It's a heavy lift to write this memo, actually, because all of these guys are involved in direct service, and then we have to stop and think about what if we were in your shoes, what would we need to know? And so, to the best of our ability, that's what we try to do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I like this format better, having sat through many of these versus the departments individually, because some department always sort of gets shortchanged, usually it's Chad.
Thank you, George.
But we also hear about all the departments during budget time as well, so
Right.
I think this is a better format, at least for me.
So quarter three, we're gonna see, what additional information will you have for us then?
Quarter three, you're going to see 2 quarters of expenditures, and you asked us to bring back information and update on Mountain Family Health Center in Basalt,
Great.
right?
Thank
And
you.
then anything else that's happening out there in the world, that
And between now and then, we'll have a resolution about appointment to the,
grievance
Grievance.
board, right? And I think Sam finishes a second hearing on the confirmatory hearing on the 11th for the La Plata work, which our team has already started. And anything else?
I think I signed a document on that this morning.
it was an emergency reso.
It's the emergency, okay, so it'll be
And
back.
generally in the fourth quarter, what we try to bring to you is, which will happen in February, I think, the fourth quarter. So the full year is when we'll bring sort of data about numbers, how many people were served, outcomes, that kind of thing.
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank
Great,
you.
it's great,
Thanks.
great summary.
Good job.
Thank you all. Nice to see you.
How do you turn this?
Okay, so I think, do we need a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a
this?
motion to adjourn as the Board of Social Services.
Second?
You have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And we are at 2:30.
The new format's faster, too.
It is, I
It's,
know, it's half an hour quicker. Well done.
It's even better.
So we could do a little work here, we could take a break, a brief, short break, come back, or we just come back, get back on the schedule.
If you'd like, if you're not ready for a break, I could go ahead and do the airport visioning update.
Yeah, I mean, we're not scheduled for break till 3, otherwise we'd have a long break.
I just have one request. I contacted the gentleman from the Associated Press. They're planning to get here around 3:30-ish. They don't need a lot of time, but I'd hate for them to drive this far and have us be done. So,
Oh, you won't be done.
okay. All right,
We've
then
got-
I don't care what you do between now and then.
We have a lot of open discussion.
Well, you've got citizen board interviews, and
I
I
have one
just
canceled, though.
one canceled at 3:30,
Teresa Hall.
but we'll have our Board of Health
Rescheduled.
bylaws discussion and future agenda.
Okay.
We got stuff.
We've got enough,
Okay.
we've got a lot
I
of
got-
board
actually,
open discussion.
Yeah,
Do you want me to do the airport?
let's sort of fill in the gap here to our
Sure.
normal.
Let's do, for all, okay, great. Come on down, John Peacock, on deck.
Second here. Actually, have a presentation. Sorry. That was on camera too. That's the worst part.
At least you didn't swear. It was close, I saw that. So John, can I ask him a question while you're setting up, if you can multitask? Do you have any ballpark idea how many members of city staff electeds and/or staff are part of the visioning process at the airport?
Believe 5
Okay.
off the top of my head, but we can get you.
Yeah, this is good. And then what about members on any of these committees, groups, are actually residents of the city?
Quite
Bigger
a few.
question.
Yeah.
But there still is a good representation.
Yeah, you guys did a really good job in appointing to ensure that there's a cross-section geographically in terms of different views and interests that may affect how they might approach the airport project. And so I think I know it's probably in relation to the article that is in the paper today, which we can talk about a little bit too. Although that was not part of what I was going to present to you today. So just real briefly, I wanted to go through with you some of the things that have happened since we last gave you an update, but more importantly, outline for you the kind of crossroads that we're at right now in the visioning process and how work is being divided amongst the different working groups and what the visioning committee itself will be doing, so you have an idea how the process is evolving. Because up until really this point, all the groups have been doing the same kind of exercises and the same kind of thing together. I'm just going to get my little laser pointer up here. And so basically, there's been a common set of education sessions that all the groups have attended. We've had a former chief counsel of the FAA. We've had a safety-related panel. We've had a panel related to growth and projections, both related to the airport but also to the community. We had a panel discussion with airlines projecting out what they see the future being. And then there's a set of common conversations where all the groups got together and identified a set of values that they felt any recommendations that are coming forward in this visioning process needed to reflect. And that's what's over on this is a summary. There's more detail obviously behind these, but the community values in summary are, safety in the air and on the ground. Any project should be adaptable, flexible, future-proofed, should reflect environmental responsibility, reflect our local culture and character and values, should promote economic vitality, should have a sense of being warm and welcoming as an entryway to our community, should reflect excellence in design, should be efficient, should focus on preserving a high quality of life, and should also have convenient and easy ground transportation options to connect that last mile. And we went through an exercise together to more specifically identify, what do these goals mean? And we had a conversation about the airport should accommodate, and these are the little flags under here, should accommodate limited growth in commercial employments. And they set a target right around 0.8%. And that was reflective of really what a terminal area forecast was for commercial employment growth in 2018. There were some common targets set around airport emissions that we would target 20 to 30% reductions in emissions for any future airport developments. Similarly, we would seek to make improvements that would reduce the overall noise levels on the ground and in the air by 20 or 30%. And all the groups were kind of working together and identifying these success factors. But the working groups were set up to really focus on specific areas. And so that is what is going to be happening now through November. And I just want to walk through what those are. So For each of the working groups, there's a core question. So the technical working group will be asking the question to meet our community values and goals. So that's around growth, that's around emissions, that's around noise, that's around all the other values. What is our desired design aircraft? In other words, there are a number of aircraft that can operate here right now as our airfield stands. There are a different set of aircraft that would be able to operate here if the improvements that were proposed in the environmental assessment were made. So they're going to be evaluating a whole set of Airport Design Group 2 and Airport Design Group 3 commercial aircraft and really relating them back to those values. How do they compare to each other on noise? How do they compare to each other when it comes to emissions? How do they compare to each other when it comes to commercial employment service and growth? And starting to target what are the aircraft that we think we want to serve this community in the future.
So, I think that's a good conversation, but we really don't have much say in that.
Well,
In terms of the aircraft, I mean, we can look at designs and determine what our airport might have the capacity to handle, but it's for us to say, well, we want this type of aircraft or that type of aircraft.
It's correct, George. You can't just unjustly discriminate against a certain type of aircraft coming in, but to understand whether the future fleets of aircraft that are likely to serve ASE meet our values more so or less so than where we are today is an important consideration in the visioning process. And so
it's much more general. It's not going to be a specific aircraft, because who knows what the airlines, what their models are.
And the airlines are very clear that they are not, disclosing that. But we're trying to give a sense of what we think the aircraft that will serve ASE are under both scenarios, and also get an idea from the community's perspective what aircraft would best meet our values. It may be that it's a Design Group 2 aircraft, which is a really different conversation around the airfield, versus a Design Group 3 aircraft, which is what's proposed. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on these. Airport Experience Group is going to be based on our values, our goals of limited employment growth, and our goal to reduce CO2 and other emissions. What would a warm, welcoming, and comfortable terminal look like? And so really looking at that footprint, looking at the different areas within the terminal and how they should be sized, what amenities should or should not be in there, and then what kind of trade-offs would we make for our goals around emissions and energy efficiency. The Community Character Working Group will be really talking about the big picture role of the airport in the community, and what they'll be working on is something similar to what we have in our county strategic plan, where we have 3 core focus areas, but under each of those we've identified specific success factors that we want reflected in decisions that the county makes. They'll be doing a similar thing for the airport project. What are those, focus areas, but what are the success factors? What are the lens that any future airport improvements or vision should be viewed through? And I'm going to explain these just a little bit more. And then the focus group will be asking, how can we improve airport connectivity? So if you look at it from the perspective of the environmental assessment, what is up here are the improvements that were proposed in the environmental assessment, for which the county was issued a finding of no significant impact. Just to orient you, this is our existing terminal. This is the proposed new terminal footprint that was proposed in the environmental assessment. New commercial apron, parking and connectivity, landside options, some changes to facilities on the ramp, and then the movement of the runway and taxiways. So that would be the 80-foot shift and widening of the runway to achieve the 400 feet of separation.
John just wanted to look at on the runway. The length of the runway doesn't change, right? Just the
Yeah, there's no
location.
proposal change the length of the runway.
Maybe not
at
even be
this point.
physical space to do
What's
that.
that?
And there's probably isn't physical space. I think it's
Yeah,
that's
pretty
pretty
think
clear.
that's as long as
The
it's gonna
1,000-foot
get.
extension maxed us when
Yeah.
we did
I was
that.
just looking at your checked lines and wanted to make sure I understood them. The other thing is when you speak about airport connectivity, you're talking about ground connectivity, not
Yeah.
connectivity to other airports.
Yep, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. So the Airport Experience Working Group is going to be looking at that whole area where the terminal is, the ramp spacing. They're going to be looking at our goals. They're going to be looking at basically design guidelines for airports, based on the target employments that the community has identified, that plus or minus 0.8% growth rate. What do you need in terms of sterile hold area? How many gates do you need to serve that employment number, given how long it takes to turn an aircraft around? And what does the ticketing area need to look like? What kind of recommendations do you want to make for it to be warm and welcoming? And so they will be looking at that whole footprint of the terminal, the proposal on the expansion of the commercial apron, and making a recommendation. I can tell you right now, based on the target employment numbers that have been established by the committees, it is very unlikely, I'd say almost 0% chance that the group is going to be recommending the 140,000 square foot terminal with up to 10 gates that was cleared in the environmental assessment. It's more likely going to be something that's a much smaller footprint, which would probably also likely affect the size of any commercial apron expansion. This will be an iterative process. They'll need to work and hear about the work of the technical committee in terms of, to your point, George, where do we think the airport design group is going to be headed for the airfield, because the capacity of the aircraft has a lot to do with the number of gates that you need to accommodate our target employment growth. And so we anticipate that they'll be looking at anywhere from 4, 5, and 6 gate options depending on the aircraft type. So that's where the experience group will be spending their time. So we'll see basically new bubble diagram and terminal concepts coming back from them, as well as that commercial apron and gate layout. The technical working committee is going to be evaluating, we're putting together a matrix first of all current Group 2 and Group 3 commercial aircraft. The first evaluation will be which of those aircraft would be commercially feasible to safely serve ASE. And so that has a lot to do with load factors and weight and the ability to do a bulk landing with only one engine. And so the first category is going to be what can feasibly and safely operate here. And then it's going to compare those aircraft based on their dimensions, their capacities, but probably most important in relation to our community values, noise comparisons. And we're looking for 3. We're looking for noise at takeoff, noise on approach or landing, and flyover noise comparisons of the different aircraft. And then emissions, what is the comparison on emissions? And then how many operations would each of the proposed aircraft need to perform in order to reach the target employment numbers? So obviously if you have a larger capacity aircraft, there's fewer operations necessary than if you have a smaller capacity aircraft. the emissions would be measured on emissions per passenger mile traveled. So pretty big matrix of data and information that the technical committee is going to be looking at. They're going to be evaluating then those aircraft against the community values discussion and the continua that were done to date to make a recommendation about the target design aircraft or the desired aircraft, because that will define what should be happening on the airfield and what should be happening on the ramps. Then they will also be making recommendations about what types of things can be done on the airfield, but also on the ramps to reduce the carbon impact. So for example, is there infrastructure that could be developed that would allow us to reduce the use of auxiliary power units that run on aircraft all the time, plug-ins, those sorts of things.
Or at least switch them to all electric, for instance.
Switch
the APUs to all electric.
Right. Well, they're generators right now, so yeah, the plugging in would basically accomplish that. Yeah. So they're going to be making recommendations along those lines that will give kind of a real stake in the ground in terms of if and what we should be doing with the airfield. The focus working group then, as you pointed out, is going to be looking at that connectivity for last mile. How do we connect the airport to the final destinations? How do we enhance the multimodal opportunities? The focus group, we're very clear that the airport project is not going to solve the long-standing conversation about how to resolve the entrance to Aspen or light rail or what have you, but they are going to be looking at all of that background information. They've got the Upper Valley Mobility Study, they've got the Record of Decision, the EIS, they've got our ground transportation plans, they'll be looking at the Aspen area community plans to really look at how does the airport fit in and feasibly fit into future connectivity. And so what do we want to be enhancing? Is there a way for us to enhance the experience for users of RAFTA at the airport? Or is there a way for us to encourage other forms of ground transportation that meet those community goals that we've already talked about?
And I'm assuming this is part of the conversation, that it's just not thinking about connectivity to Aspen, because the vast majority of snowmass guests in the wintertime come in through the airport.
Yep, it's going to be inclusive of the entire valley, so Aspen, snowmass, and down valley.
It gets very quickly into an issue like the entrance to Aspen.
Understood, and we're being very careful about that conversation. There is a lot of information that group is going to be looking at. It's going to be starting with a panel discussion. So Dave Pesnicek has been helping put that together for us. We're going to have speakers. Crystal Logan's going to speak from the Aspen Institute and the Community Forum ideas. Dave's going to give a history. We're going to have representatives from the city of Aspen and Snowmass talking about transportation plans, as well as David Johnson from RAFTA.
It occurs to me that, I'm sure it's part of it, but to look at the demographics of an aging population and how it uses and interacts slightly differently than with an airport. Down the road there could be, a lot more seniors, for instance, or.
Yeah, and so that's part of the future-proofing discussion in terms of how do we not build our way out of options, because what we want to do in the near term may be different than the transportation needs in the long term, both because of demographic shifts, technology shifts, whole lots of different shifts.
Right.
Patty? Talking about the future proofing, we had way back talked about a terminal that didn't restrict our ability to add on in the future, which our current terminal did because of slope issues in design. So that's where we're not able to just add a baggage area or, change the ramp interior ramp to get from one level to the other. So I'm hoping that stays in that discussion too when you're talking the terminal, so that if in the future we needed to add more, more TSA regs come down, the pipeline from Washington, we won't find ourselves in that same restricted environment.
Yeah, so that's going to be one of the design challenges that the Experience Committee will have. And, I think a lot of our goals are going to point towards, how do we fix some of the slope issues? Because on the ramp, the slope issues prevent us from using electric tugs, for example.
Right.
It causes the terminal to be at different levels than our existing terminal, which doesn't work for that type of flexibility that you're talking about. So those are all going to be part of the conversation going forward. The community character group, really their job, they don't have a specific geography, but their job is to help define the lens that we're viewing these recommendations for the Vision Committee. And the Vision Committee then really takes all of this and is responsible for forming a final recommendation back to the board. So they'll be getting reports from the Airport Experience Working Group, the Technical Working Group, the Focus Working Group, the Technical Working Group, as well as the Community Character Working Group. It's likely that there might be some differences in how these different groups approach recommendations. The Vision Committee will be responsible for trying to find a consensus or a compromise between those different positions and making a final recommendation back to the board. So we're quite a ways into this process. We're just now really dividing up the questions and the work, but I hope you can see how we're covering all of the geography that was really evaluated in the environmental assessment and giving the community another bite at the apple there.
Kelly?
Yeah, I guess, it has been a big outstanding question for me, and I'm curious which of these groups is going to tackle the element of the private aviation, the general aviation side of things at the airport.
Yeah, so thanks, Kelly. And really, so I probably didn't finish on the technical working group. Sorry, I was going back to slides I actually did for the Vision Committee that aren't in this presentation. So the technical working group will start off looking at commercial. It is more difficult to put the GA information together because it's more difficult to project what will be coming in. But we do have a forecast that includes general aviation aircraft, both Group 2 and Group 3. So we will be putting this same type of information together as similarly as we can for the commercial aircraft for GA, for the technical committee to look at, and that will also have a projection of operations and such.
Because I guess my concern is there's always the element of being able to set a goal and employments for the commercial side, but the backfilling of any airtime that opens for the private side, is a real concern for me of how we still manage to reach our emissions goals or our employment goals or our noise reduction goals if we've now created a vacuum that just can get filled in with private planes.
And that is a legitimate concern because the FAA controls the airspace. We don't schedule either commercial or GA landings and such. And so as capacity gets created on the commercial side, for example, if there were fewer operations, do they get filled with GA, and what does that look like, and how does that affect the goals? So it is going to be inclusive of GA and commercial. We're starting with commercial primarily because the Experience Working Group and the Focus Group can't really start their work without having an understanding of where commercial is. And then we'll come back to the GA because the GA is really about the runway and ramp space at the end of the day. So yeah, we will. Thanks for bringing me back to that. So Vision Committee gets to pull it all together. And we are currently looking at,
Focus.
what's
A
that?
vision committee does.
Vision Committee does,
Is the
yeah.
focus group the one that we had with people at the end of the day? Because I think we had 4.
It is a larger group of folks
Of
that,
mixed.
yeah, that weren't appointed to the different specific committees around airport
Now they have a
experience or
task.
community character, with the idea that there's going to be a task or multiple tasks
Perfect.
that would need to be fed out, and we felt like connectivity was a good one.
Perfect.
So, August 12th, just to kind of run you through our general timeline right now, we had our airline panel, so representatives from airline. Delta did not participate in that, but American and United did. We had our, yesterday, we had a vision committee meeting where we went through the same materials I just presented you, but we talked about it for 2 hours, so it was a much more detailed conversation with the vision committee, just to make sure that they are comfortable with how the next steps will be progressing. By the way, I did not tell you what the visioning committee will be doing, which is they are going to divide up. Vision committee members have different areas of interest that brought them to the table, so they're going to divide up and observe the work of the working group so that they can bring their observations, those conversations, and what was considered back to the big table. We were really fortunate yesterday. I think there's interest in all the working groups among different members of the visioning committee. So they're going to be really tracking that work and bringing reports back.
And will they, when they go to those other groups, will they be accompanied by one of the 3, like either John Bennett or Meg or Jackie?
Not necessarily. We didn't structure it that much, but I do know John, Meg, and Jackie all have different interests in what the working groups are doing too. So
that may work
I
out
anticipate
anyway.
they'll be in attendance. That tomorrow the focus group will be meeting and having their first panel on connectivity. And as board members, if you want to observe, again, I just encourage you not to participate in that. Yeah, not to opine in the meetings, because you are ultimately going to have the final say, and it can tip the room a little bit when you walk in. But if you wanted to observe any of these, these are going to be really interesting conversations. So
Televised, filmed?
these are not they are recorded, so there will
We
be
can
audio
still-
recordings and minutes. So
And they'll be in this room, or?
they are split up into different places. Mostly we've either got them in the Roaring Fork room or in the community room at the police department. The focus group will be meeting in the community room of the police department tomorrow. August 29th then, Thursday, the community character group will be having their first meeting. We're still working on setting up the technical committees next meeting. We're still getting that matrix of data put together. We're anticipating second week of September that they'll be meeting. There's going to be an all-group meeting on September 18th, just debrief kind of where we're at in the process. And then we're going to be setting up meetings. They're not all on here between now and mid-November. We're targeting November 13th as a report out opportunity for all of the groups to start giving their recommendations back to the visioning committee, who will then start to process that information into a final recommendation. We are still targeting a completion in December, but it's likely to slip into the first quarter of next year, because this is a massive amount of work that these groups are doing now. So we will be back to you. We're targeting we anticipate that a final recommendation will come to this body first quarter of next year for consideration. So that's where we're at now.
Good.
Thank you. Questions? Comments?
Break?
I have a question. Is the participation levels?
We're still having, it was very good on the visioning. The vision committee participation has been good, and I expect as summer I've had a number of people have caught me on the street. Gosh, I'm sorry I wasn't able to make it, but we have been away, or it's a busy time of year. So we're anticipating that that's going to improve as we go into fall, kind of the shoulder season. The second thing is I think now that we've really assigned specific tasks, we're going to see some re-engagement.
Yeah, because I had heard
Because
from
there is some frustration about
people
that.
in the focus group who were like, well, obviously they don't have anything for me to do, and I'm like, I don't think it's gotten to that point yet, and so hopefully now that there is that task, that we can get that enthusiasm back again.
I think we're hearing from all the groups. You know, the Airport Experience Committee is ready to pick colors. The technical committee is really anxious to start to sink their teeth into the technical data. I think we have a really meaty topic with the connectivity question for the focus group, and so we knew there was some frustration. We all needed to get on the same page in terms of some base data and base values, and that's always the hard part. We anticipated there's going to be some, maybe a little bit of grumpiness going through that, but it was important. We needed to get those baselines, and now we're all kind of marching in the same direction.
Two things I think are important for me is I want to thank everybody who's participating, who's going to be participating, who's been hanging in there, who's going to rally back again for their time. This is such a huge community effort for our community airport. That's the first thing. The second thing is I want to be very clear again that the Board of County Commissioners has not made any decisions. We are still waiting to hear from what the community wants us to do and move forward in the future. So there's some people who still think that, and I want them to know that we've been kept up to speed on what's going on, and sometimes we can watch the meetings when there's good technical or good speakers that come, but we have not, as a group, made up our minds. I think we need to be continually clear with the community.
Kelly?
What's how's it working out with the consultants and the role that they're playing in these individual groups?
Yeah, I would say that right now, from a leadership perspective, both the citizen leadership, particularly John Bennett and Meg Haynes and Jackie Francis, along with county staff, have stepped up more into a leadership role in the public process. The consultants are providing a supporting role in collecting the data, keeping the information updated on the website, and doing a lot of the baseline work. And they've been also providing a lot of support for facilitation in all the meetings. And their role is going to become more active as the individual groups work. And so, for example, as the Airport Experience Committee starts, the Planning 101 is going to be really led by our consulting team. There's going to be a charrette exercise or set of charrette exercises with the Airport Experience Group that's not going to be facilitated by county staff. Similarly, we're not putting together all the matrix data and technical data. So I think we've gotten into our swim lanes. Well, we may have been out of them a little bit at the beginning of the process, but I think we've rectified that.
Great, thank you.
We've got a citizen board interview coming up at 3:15, so I'd like to take a break now if you're
Absolutely. Sorry.
And that was the visioning, right? So we still have air curfew and noise. Is John coming in for that? Or
Yeah.
so we'll keep that at 4:30, 4:45.
I'll try and get them here a little earlier.
Great. Okay, why don't we take a grassroots? We're going to take a 15-minute break or 12-minute break. Get it back at, say, 3:20.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did I keep our wishes asleep?
Grassroots up, and we're up. We're back on. Hi, everybody. Tuesday, August 27th, BOCC work session, and we're doing citizen board interviews. And the first one up is John Doyle for P&Z. Welcome. Glad
Thanks.
you're here.
Good to be here.
Want to start with somebody always starts
I'll
this.
start.
Patty starts.
So thank you. Thank you for showing interest in this. And I think the biggest question I have is why? Why would you like to be on this board?
Well, really two reasons. I originally kind of woke up out of my, I think an average citizen in Aspen doesn't really make waves or write letters to the editor. And there are so many people that work for the ski company that are afraid to. I don't. I started raising my voice last winter when the zoning was proposed to be changed for the Gorsuch House. It was zone conservation. I'm not sure how that situation stands now, but I just saw it as, do we really need to change the zoning to put another building in a spot that had always been vacant of buildings? So that kind of woke me up. The other reason, so changing zoning to benefit the few over the many is a problem that I'd like to address. And my other thing is climate change. And I think it's a much bigger problem than anybody in local government or national government is really paying attention to.
And in that, you mean you think there's some impact on growth? And development
Certainly the way it's done, business as usual. Yeah.
Right, thanks.
Let me just follow up on that. So, how do you see serving on P&Z would be addressing some of those concerns?
I think I'd like to bring a more environmentally conscious voice to the board. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm just saying one more person on the board who speaks to the needs of the environment and climate change would be a positive.
So I just want to drill down a little bit more on that. How would that relate to land use applications or development applications coming in to the P&Z?
Well, for instance, right now there's the talk about the solar farm down in Woody Creek. And I read a lot. And I think I can help educate people as to, and educate myself as to who benefits the most and does it hurt the planet.
Okay, thanks.
Steve?
You've spent a long time as a home builder, property maintenance, lodge maintenance, as well as doing your artwork.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel that that experience will help you on the P&Z?
Well, because I have done quite a bit of construction and helped run the Tyrolean Lodge. I'm aware of Pierre Willie's constantly telling me about the ins and outs of running a lodge and being in business in Aspen, and my construction background and my art background both. I'm dependent on tourists for that, or on second homeowners. So I think I have a pretty well-rounded background in approaching all those things and knowing how to get things done, get things built.
Okay. Do you think there would be any times you would have a conflict of interest based on what, your clients or people you've worked for?
I really don't.
Okay.
Kelly?
Hi, John. Thanks for applying.
You're welcome, Kelly.
I have two questions. Have you participated in any of the caucuses? And then also in the course of your work life, have you had to come before the Planning and Zoning Commission for any applications?
I have not had to come before Planning and Zoning for any of the construction projects I've worked on. I'm sorry, what was your first question?
Oh, have you participated in any of the caucuses?
A little bit in the Castle Creek caucus, just because my wife and I have a cabin up on the back of the mountain, and I haven't participated much because, in my experience, mostly the Castle Creek caucus is more concerned with traffic impediments on Castle Creek Road. There are a lot of emails. I get all the emails from the Castle Creek caucus whenever something happens, and I was a little bit chagrined about, I don't know when it was, about a decade ago, when the original bike trail was proposed, and it got shut down by several very wealthy neighbors of mine that live on the valley floor. And it was, once again, it was for their benefit, not for the benefit of the many. There really is a safety issue there. I think we all understand that. I drive up and down Castle Creek Road at least several times a week. And especially in the summertime, there's more and more traffic, more and more people on bicycles, and the students walking to and from the campus with their instruments is really an accident waiting to happen.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
George?
You have a strong voice as a citizen when you come before P&Z or when you come before the BOCC on a particular issue. Serving on the P&Z, your voice may get a little diffused a little bit because now you're working with a group of other members, and sometimes compromise needs to be made. I mean, we're trying to strive towards a consensus in terms of a particular project. How do you sort of see yourself fitting in really a different type of role, at least what I've seen you in just recently?
Mm-hmm.
Much different type of role.
That actually has been pointed out to me by a couple of my peers, a couple of my, I have some, I don't know if mentor is the right word, but I know quite a few people around town that have helped me out behind the scenes and encouraged me. And it has been pointed out that by being on a citizen board, I have to temper my opinion, and I have to. It was mentioned, pretty much this particular person said, you realize that by being on a citizen board, you won't be able to be as outspoken as you are now. And I hadn't really thought about that, but I have been since he said it to me. So I think I'm a pretty quick study, and I think I could work with people. I have a good reputation with just about everybody in town. Probably not with the ski company at the moment, but I think if you asked around town, you would find that I'm pretty well liked, and I get along well with people.
The housing is always an issue for the community as a whole. Where do you think affordable housing should be located? Within the UGB, outside the UGB, anywhere?
I think at this stage, really anywhere it can be put, within reason. I mean, the BMC property, I think that'll work. I think really anywhere that, I'm certainly for it, wherever we can put it, really.
I'm good.
You have another question?
I'm
Okay,
good.
George?
Just a time commitment. P&Z is a fairly time commitment in terms of meetings and in the evenings and
Packets are big.
Can you give me an estimate of how much time is involved? It's every other Tuesday? Is that when
Twice
P&Z
a month.
meets?
Our meetings are usually 5 to, as you know, can be 5 to 6 or 5 to 8 or 5 to 9. The packets generally that are generated, depending upon the applications you're reviewing, can be an inch to multiple. All the information really is in there for the first round for P&Z. So there's a lot of homework to be done. They have not been calling special meetings when they do review caucus area master plans. I think there's a little more time that's put in because they actually go through the P&Z process. They review them and approve them, and then they come back to the board just for a nod of our heads. But so that time of year can be a little busier. That's done. How often are caucus master plans reviewed? Every couple of years?
Well, there's still a few that they're still working on. Yeah,
So,
Castle Creek's probably being one of them. Yeah.
Kelly?
Did that answer your question about time commitment before I ask my question?
So it's twice a month.
With
There's
homework
quite a bit of
in
reading.
advance.
yeah.
I like to read, and I actually process things pretty quickly. So I'm excited by the challenge of it. Aspen's been really good to me and really good for me, and I think it's might be time to give back. I'm also trying to set an example for my daughter. My daughter's 11 and a half, and I'm concerned about the climate for her future. But yeah,
So-
I'd like to show her that public service is something we all should be part of.
So then, Pickens County goes Redstone, Basalt, up the Frying Pan, all the way up Lincoln Creek Road. I guess I'm guessing or have a sense that you have a vision for what the future of the county should be, and if so, what is that? What would you care to share with us?
Well, I think growth is inevitable for sure, but I think we can do it in a reasonable way. And again, I think we should do it in the most environmental way possible. That really
The most
is
what way?
the most environmental way possible.
Got it. Thanks.
I had a question. Are the P&Z packets electronic now as well as paper? Can you request either or is it an
You
electronic?
can request either or.
So you can have an electronic packet from P&Z as well, because you can have a choice on this board whether you get a stack of paper or do it online. Just wanted to know if that's an option, but I just wanted to thank you. I've known you since probably about the time you hit town, I think.
Yeah.
It's been a long while. And for your participation so far in the various activities in the community. I know you've been here for, I don't know how many years it's on here, somewhere about 85 or so?
Moved here in 82 full time.
82, okay. And then I was just, if you tell us a little bit about your art background. I'm not sure if people know what sort of art you do.
So I studied art and architecture at the University of Idaho. It's up in the Panhandle, not far from Spokane. And my family moved here when I was in college as a freshman, so I used to come home every summer. And I got out of college and I thought, I'm going to go home for the summer, live with mom for a little bit, and same old story. I never left. And then I actually did not graduate with a degree, so I didn't graduate. I went to college for 3 years, and I ended up just really enjoying my time here in Aspen, and I moved up to the backside of Aspen Mountain in 1988, and a friend of mine suggested that I carve a totem pole for my cabin, and I thought it was off season, and I had 2 months of free time on my hands, and I thought, great idea. Sat down and carved a totem pole. Got a lot of positive feedback on it. The same friend suggested that I bring it up to a house in Starwood, this place we were catering that night, and it just happened to be Bob and Nancy Magoon, huge patrons of the art, and he said, if you bring photos, you'll sell it to these people. And he was right, and I got a pretty substantial paycheck, and I said, I'm going to carve another one. And so that's how my art career
was born.
Started.
Ah, that's great.
And I've branched out since then. It's not just totem poles, but in my packet you can look up my website, johndoylesculpture.com, and check out my stuff if you'd like.
You had a totem pole at the Wheeler or at the Jerome Hotel for a decade or two, right?
Yeah, it was 15 years,
yeah.
From 1990 to 2005, something like that.
Great. Yeah, well, thank you. Any questions for us? Anything else for us?
No, I think that'll do it. My main question was just the time commitment, but I'm sure I can handle it. Right.
And great, really appreciate your, setting an example for your kids. I get that. it's a great thing. And you have a middle school age child?
6th grade.
6th grade. All right.
Yep.
Great. Excellent.
So I don't know what the time frame is. We've interviewed we have a couple openings, so I don't know if we have any more applicants.
I think we might.
This, I believe. Just a second.
We have 2 vacancies.
2 vacancies, and you're the 3rd person we've interviewed, so, are there any other applicants at this time, John?
No other applicants at this time.
Okay.
So you have 3 that you've interviewed and 2 openings.
Got it. So it'll take a little while, but we're going to consider it in a future meeting. We'll get back to you.
Okay.
We'll be in touch.
Great.
Great. Thanks.
you.
Thank you for coming in.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
I'll see you tomorrow.
See you soon.
I'll accept Patty.
Not me, sorry.
Okay. All right. So next up, Teresa Hall, I understand, will not be here today. We'll see her at a future meeting. Karen is here. Board of Health Citizen Board bylaws discussion. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. Karen Kenneman, Public Health Director. So I'm here today to have a little bit of a work session with you in regard to amending the Board of Health bylaws. Going through this process of thinking about amending the bylaws, there was a recognition that I never brought the bylaws to the BOCC to begin with.
What bylaws?
Yeah. So the Board of Health had approved the bylaws, but you all never saw them to approve them. So this is a great learning opportunity to fix that error. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about amending them, and then also recognize that the resolution that established the original Board of Health was a resolution that was passed in 2014, and that resolution needs to be repealed and replaced. And so thinking through after our discussion today, pulling the first read on the bylaws, which are scheduled to go tomorrow, and pushing
Oh, I thought you were passing it.
pushing this off a little bit so we have some time to come back to you with both the resolution and the bylaw amendments for first read. So do you want me to just dive in and talk to you about the amendments?
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. If any other questions will come up.
I don't want to talk about this. So the main recommendation from the Board of Health was that they recognized that we didn't have alternate members for the Board of Health, and there was a recommendation from the whole Board of Health that we have an alternate for both the elected officials that serve on the Board of Health, so that includes a representative from the Board of County Commissioners, a representative from the City of Aspen, and a representative from the Town of Snowmass. And then also we have 4 at-large members, in that we would have 1 alternate member to represent the 4 at-large. And that the expectation for alternate members was that they would come to the meetings just as other board members would. Of course, they wouldn't have a vote at the table, but would be there to participate and understand. And if the official Board of Health member was not able to attend, that their alternate could then stand in their stead and vote. So that was the recommendation by the Board of Health, and that was put into the highlighted area of the Board of Health bylaws. So that's what we really wanted to talk about today. But then recognizing that the resolution that was passed in 2014 and the bylaws, the terms don't actually match for the elected officials. So wanted to talk with you a little bit about the terms for the elected officials as well, since that came up intermittent between the time that we started to look through these documents. And John, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about terms for electeds or...
Yeah, the way that we had initially set this up was that each of the municipal bodies, so Snowmass and Aspen in this case, would have the opportunity to appoint their own, and the Board of County Commissioners would have the opportunity to appoint their own member. And so those terms will be different than for the citizen appointed members, similar to what we're doing with APSHA.
But it would be for a 1-year term, because the term limits people can change. If you appointed somebody, they could be.
It'll be up to each of the bodies, yeah.
George?
That's just how.
We need to clarify that?
Well, no, that's just how we do all of our board
Yeah.
appointments. Every January, we do our board appointments,
Yeah.
and so I think
Makes
that
sense.
would be the same for the Board of Health. My question is, normally, one looks at having alternates to ensure a quorum for voting. So is that really the main concern?
You know, there was one meeting that we had that we barely got a quorum, a scheduled meeting, and then we've had a couple work sessions where we've had some ad hoc things that we had to bring up, and quorum's been fairly difficult for those work sessions.
Yeah, the way it's worded, you would encourage the alternate to attend, but as an alternate, again, usually the alternate is there to fill in for the regular to ensure a quorum and to vote. But I wouldn't want to place a requirement that an alternate needs to attend because they're just an alternate, right? So I don't know how the wording somehow should
Sure.
reflect that a little bit better, at least for me.
Okay, that makes sense, George. And I think the intent behind that was that in order to be able to vote, they might have a better understanding of the Board of Health business, and so by being there, but I totally hear that, and if it just makes sense to have them to represent when their member is out and that they're filling in that spot, that makes sense.
And then for one last question or point, for the elected positions, that's very easy in terms of it's just each board just designates an alternate. But for the alternate for the citizen places, who would then appoint them?
They
would come back to the BOCC, or
come back to the BOCC. So I would imagine we would do interviews for the alternate, just like we have for the main members, and that it would come to the BOCC for appointment.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So it's one alternate for all four at large.
Right.
Right. Steve?
So Karen, has there been problem getting a quorum at the Board of Health meetings, and that's why you want to add one more person to fill in when someone has a time conflict, they can't be there that time, so you can be more assured of having a quorum?
Exactly. Yeah, and to George's point, I think we've struggled once with a quarterly meeting getting quorum, and then in some of the work sessions where we were taking or trying to, I guess, educate folks to get back to a quarterly, that we didn't have a quorum, and so not that we were necessarily, I guess maybe we were taking votes then, but so partly it's that to ensure that we have that knowledgeable or ability to make those votes. Yeah.
Okay. And I have a couple, they were just a couple
Sure.
of typos. I could just give them,
Absolutely.
give the papers to you, and then they could be corrected before the meeting. One's in the resolution. My papers, I have all these meetings all here mixed up now.
While you're
Karen's
looking,
getting
Kelly,
nervous.
did you have questions regarding that?
No, this is all very straightforward and makes sense to me.
I had a question just regarding alternate membership. Like, we're as other boards do, we advise the alternate to go when they can, or it seems like that's the MO. Would this be markedly different if we didn't? If somebody's not going to be there, they could alert their alternate and brief them, perhaps. Will that work? Is that what you're thinking, George?
Well, that's pretty much how it's used for all of our other boards.
For our elected position, but
that
the
we utilize
at-large, it's
alternates.
just one for all four.
Right.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that
It's
would
worth
be
a
a
try.
little.
We could try
A
that.
little more
Yeah,
difficult.
it'd be a little more difficult because it would be more of a communication, who's going to be there, who's not, and it's a little bit different, but.
Yeah, I would recommend having the alternate for the four at large as best they can attend the meetings, because just like when I was on planning and zoning and was the alternate, I went to all the meetings, because you never know when you're going to vote, you never know when the issue's going to come back and you wish you'd been there. So, so I think that would be highly suggested that the alternates attend.
Okay.
So
that
they
makes
can
sense.
participate.
And, okay.
I certainly think it's a good idea. I would do that.
Okay.
Steve, did you find your
Yeah, I got them to her.
The other comment I wanted to make on this was just that now has Ann stepped off and Tori taken her place now? I know on our
Yeah,
packet.
they still have scab.
Yeah, so on the, I think the document that was attached, that was an older
The older one.
version. So Tori is now the representative from the city of Aspen, and we're working through just maybe some documentation or a letter from the city just to acknowledge that.
And Marky's still for Snowmass?
Marky's still for Snowmass, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I just wanted to say I've been really enjoyed participating in the Board of Health. I have missed meetings this year due to travel for other county-related meetings. But I have to say it's a great board. It's exciting, meaty, important material. A lot of the things that we talk about certainly are front and center on the minds of the community, and will be coming to us, as needed. And certainly they'll be coming up in the upcoming election as well.
I guess I do just have a question. Are the minutes of the Board of Health meetings like action minutes, or are they a narrative of what was discussed? Because those can help determine if someone can just read what they've missed as opposed to really need to be in person.
Yeah, they definitely have all the action items. I don't think they were as brief as like a minutes from more of a structured Robert's Rules of Order, so they're a little bit more narrative, and we're working on making them more just the actions, but all the actions are in there. So I think you could get a full sense from the minutes of what had happened. But I do think the nuances of some of the regulations that the Board of Health looks at, they can be fairly complicated regulatory pieces that the board has to really tussle with and approve, and so being there is certainly helpful to get the nuances of
Are they
all those.
taped?
And they're not taped, so the minutes are the only way. They're obviously publicly noticed, but the minutes are really the only way to get that if you're not present. So,
Do you think you have direction here, or what else do you need from us?
so as far as the way the language is written in the bylaws, I will put the caveat of that the alternates do not have to attend every meeting, but it's recommended, especially for the member at large alternate. And then I guess just getting back to the terms a little bit. So as written in the bylaws, and then as I mentioned, they don't quite match the resolution of 2014. They are, for the electeds, the terms are laid out. So in the resolution, they're laid out that the town of Snowmass and the city of Aspen are 5-year terms, and that the BOCC representative ends at their term ending at the BOCC. So they're different. And then in the bylaws, I believe that I have to pull them up, but they're staggered terms, and I think they're either 3 or 4 years. So just want to have that. I want to create consistency around that, and the BOCC sets the terms. So if you want to give me some direction of what you would like those terms to look like for the electeds as opposed to the alternate members.
Will you have a recommendation for us, or you're thinking we'll come up with something? Makes me nervous.
Yes. Well, and I know, I guess, John, this is what I was wondering from your perspective was, do we want the elected terms to just end when their elected term ends? Does that make sense?
I would keep that much more open. I would just say that the elected positions are appointed by each corresponding board on an annual basis, and just leave it like that.
So it could be the same person for 3 years.
It could be, it
different
may
people.
not,
Okay.
yeah.
So I think I wouldn't even say on an annual basis. We have that process. I don't think the municipalities necessarily do, but shall be appointed and amended, as from time to time approved by
The individual jurisdiction.
Okay.
And
hopefully there will be some consistency in that participation, but we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that for me, it'd be great if we're consistent along, with all of our boards. If we can be, just so the rules don't seem to change so much between each board.
Okay.
But it sounds like you've got what you need.
I do. Thank
Great.
you. Okay. Appreciate
Great
it.
to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, what's up next? We have future agenda review. Is that where we are now?
If that's what you tell me, Greg, that is where we're at.
Okay, that's where we are.
Oh, you're so obedient.
I like yeah. How come he doesn't always behave this way?
So Just have a few items for you. One, there is a listening session. I think all of you got an email about it that Senator Bennett's office is holding in Basalt on the 29th, so a couple days from now, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Senator Bennett will not be there. It's going to be, and I just blanked on her name.
Alyssa,
Yeah, I apologize.
Allison? No.
I'm not going to come up with it now, but we just wanted to see if there were any commissioners going, if it's something that we needed to post on the agendas or not.
It's my understanding that this meeting was appointments to meet with constituents to discuss any individual issues that the constituent may have.
Yeah, it's typically, these listening sessions typically have to do, or they're with whether there's any issues with specific agencies or what have you.
I had it in
from
here
time to
still.
time, members of an elected body will tend to raise larger issues. I don't think we have anything at this time that would probably rise to that, but that would be up to you guys. We just wanted to do a check-in since you all received the email.
Yeah, I mean, normally we would actually invite our delegates, staff people to come to a work session and spend some time with us. So we may want to extend that invitation to her, and depending how on a future agenda. But I also noticed, I thought I read that Senator Bennett is going to be in town as well at a different
I
date.
have not received that. Yeah.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, I don't
So we
recall.
can check on that. I don't know.
Oh, okay, I thought I got an
Well,
email.
maybe for a
Here's the
political
email.
event.
What?
I think maybe for a
What's the date on that
political
one?
event.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the thing, it's with Alyssa is her name, so I was right. the first
Alyssa,
time.
thank you.
And it's please describe a brief description of the issue you want to address. If you want to make an appointment, then you email her and make an appointment for a time to set up. It's at the Basalt Library, of course, from 10:30 to 3. So it's mostly with individual constituents. I was going to try and go down there, but I don't think I might just go down there just to say hello and touch base with her. She used to come or try to come to the Northwest COG meetings, but we've actually been seeing John Whitney a lot, and then we've been seeing Michael Bennett's rep out of Routt County area. He's been coming over to a lot of the meetings. So we've had good participation from Senator Bennett's office at the COG meetings, which has been great.
Right. John Whitney has come to and visited us here in the building a couple times in the last year already. So I don't plan to be down there. If I'm in the neighborhood, I'll say hi, but that's it.
Okay.
And this doesn't
That
say
doesn't
anything
sound
about the
like
senator coming.
and
No,
that's
that's
fine.
something
We just
else.
wanted to do a check-in so we
Right.
didn't
Yeah.
have a surprise with three of you showing up. Other question that I've received is Senator Tipton's office is scheduling a listening session in Rifle. We did get confirmation that they're doing that on an invite basis. They're trying to keep the group small, and that their intention is to reach out to us in September to schedule a similar meeting. So, Greg, you
Let
were
me just say,
asking.
Picken County has not been invited to meet with
We have not been invited to meet.
Representative Tipton
That's
in
correct.
Rifle, very close to home.
About
Closer
an
than
issue that's
Washington,
impacting
DC.
lands within Pitkin County.
And
Can we
they-
repeat that again?
They did confirm that the Rifle meeting would be concentrating on Thompson Divide.
Which
it
is
would be.
Pitkin
Unbelievable.
County. So Senator Tipton is not inviting us, I'm going to repeat this, to his meeting in Rifle to talk about Thompson Divide. But hopefully they'll set something up with us in the
They
future.
said that they'd be reaching out to us in September to schedule a similar meeting.
Right, and it should be noted that his I think it's called the REC Act that he's
That's what this
proposed
meeting is about.
as a as an alternative to the CORE Act, which Bennett and Nagoose proposed, does not include the Thompson Divide. So I thought, well, if he's not including the Thompson Divide, maybe he doesn't need to talk to us. But if he's talking about the Thompson Divide and we're not invited, I could see a reason why people might be a little bit frustrated.
When is that meeting?
Thursday. Don't we have a bus going that direction?
I don't have
It's not a
on-
public meeting. It's
I
an
think I
by
have it
invite.
here.
Yeah, it's this week.
It's on
Thursday.
the
Yeah.
So
It's got the third listening. It's the third. It's September 30th. No,
It does raise some eyebrows.
September in Uray.
That's not it.
Yeah, we can go to Uray if we'd rather.
It's a great drive. This doesn't give a date. It just says the week of September. We just go to Uray for the week? Got good hot springs over there.
Well, thank you for
So,
that.
Yeah, so that's all the information we've got on that now.
We have a member of the press in the room, and I think it should be duly noted that we are feeling snubbed by our congressman. We feel like we should be included in that meeting in Rifle. It would be a chance for us to give our viewpoints to some of the other entities who have perhaps differing viewpoint from us. And we won't have that opportunity to be in the same room with them and make those points. We can make our points up here. The other counties and cities aren't going to be sitting in the room with us up here.
It's very interesting.
So I'm really
endorse the
disappointed
use
in
of the
the
word
action
snub.
of our congressman.
What was that, Kelly?
I said I will endorse the use of the word snub.
Right. I think we could perhaps suggest a letter or a comment to their office so they understand and they get the message that it does seem very inappropriate that they're discussing Thompson Divide, which is in our county, and they're discussing it with surrounding counties, but not with us. I think that would be an appropriate
Where did you
missive
get
for
that
them.
invite? Because the only one I have just talks about a meeting in Uray.
This is Rifle on Thursday morning.
Oh, this
Yeah.
Thursday?
This Thursday, yeah.
Oh, I didn't get it at all. So
Close
that
to
tells
home,
you. He's
right.
the one
No,
who
none
calls
of
me
us-
direct. I'm the one he
Wisconsin.
calls direct from Washington, D.C., and he doesn't even invite me to a meeting in Rifle.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but it'd be nice to get to the bottom of it before we go any farther, making assumptions. But it's interesting to hear if it's on the topic of Thompson Divide, and we're not there. That is actually border, approaching boiling point, I'd say. Okay, on to the next topic. What else you got?
I've got nothing better than that.
Oh, well, that was pretty good. Gee.
I have one thing, believe it or not, on future agendas. It happens to be for tomorrow. I'm going to ask the board if when we open the meeting tomorrow for changes to the agenda, we can move item number 10 to before item number 9, which is the ski company.
Greg and I already talked about
Yep,
that.
we've already suggested
you.
we're planning on doing that. So yeah, the final ordinance tomorrow, hearing at number 10 will move up. So the Aspen Mountain Ski Area amended master plan will be at the end of that meeting.
And was that an emergency reso, Johnny? It wasn't, was it? Changing the code? It wasn't an emergency.
There was a first hearing already.
Yeah, because
right?
we got a letter from somebody from Woody Creek who said it was done as an emergency, and I didn't recall that.
I don't believe it.
Did you remember that?
I don't remember that, but
Yeah.
That was
okay.
on the 14th of August.
Yeah, so I'll follow up on that. Is
I
that
think-
tomorrow's
yeah.
agenda? The pink?
This is the pink?
How did you get a purple-violet copy?
It's changed color several times in the last few
Jeepers.
days.
So I have one item for future agendas.
Yeah, it doesn't. Thanks.
We are going to be invited to a nice meeting with the Eagle County Commissioners. It's a meet and greet and ice cream social. It's on the same day as our regular meeting on September 11th from 4 to 6 in Elgibel. We are going to receive a letter of invitation. I know I've heard from Matt Scherer to that effect. I don't know if any of us would be able to go because we'll probably be having a fairly lengthy meeting, I think, that day. But anyhow,
Sunfire Ranch, is that
just for everyone's information, and we might want to put it on.
Post it.
That's the
on our
regular meeting we're
agendas,
doing.
Just in case we get done earlier and people could go down there.
That's the day we're doing the Sunfire Ranch Conservation,
Yeah. So it's from 4 to 6.
Open Space Master
And
Plan.
I don't know, we
And
have to
what-
notice that, because chances are none of us are gonna run late and none of us are gonna make it to it anyhow, but.
And, technically, no, but we try and do that for transparency purposes. If 3 or more members of the board are going to be there, it's not a policy making meeting. I assume of both
Ice cream.
bodies. It's ice cream, yeah.
But maybe
So
when we
it'd be
get the
incidental,
invitation,
yeah.
we can put it on the agenda
Yeah,
when we
yeah,
get the
and so
invitation.
I think
like
it
to
would
do
be
that
more of
for
a listening
transparency.
session for us to, if other residents of the valley have concerns they're expressing to the Eagle commissioners, that we could be there to,
Oh, if that's the
hear
case,
them.
it'd be better to post that.
yeah.
What kind of ice cream?
Wait, there is a meeting on the 5th of September. It's a Childcare Coalition or Childcare meeting that Shirley Ritter's calling. I didn't know, I'm gonna try and attend, and I think Kelly is gonna try and attend. I don't know if anybody else is interested.
It's a lunch and learn.
Yeah, it's 11:30 to 1:30. It's at the Picken County Library.
I'm gonna wait and see for me.
Yeah, because I think it'd be very informative as to Kelly's suggestion that we have kind of a broader discussion about childcare. The city's using childcare as a top priority on their top 10 list. What's going on regional with childcare issues?
Yeah, and so we actually just met with city staff today because their conversations have been moving. So we're trying to get coordinated on how to have the conversation now. So
Yeah,
probably
perfect.
want to visit with you.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and to attend this, because, Kelly and I try and attend the BOCC Coalition, Childcare Coalition meetings when we can, so that's kind of
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, well, I may talk to both of you about
Yeah.
the different players.
Okay, anything else for future agendas? All right, we should move to open discussion, board open discussion then. That's what's up next.
So we have a number of staff updates, and so I think, Brian, maybe we can start off with the Smith Hill sinkhole.
Our Florida-style sinkhole.
Yes, so we actually, in Public Works, have three quick updates. One is the sinkhole. The other is we have a request to place a soil moisture gauging station on county land. And then Kathy's here to talk about the increased fees in waste that we had recent complaints about. So the first thing is the sinkhole is not in Smith Hill. It's not in the county road. It's in the median between the up valley and down valley lanes of State Highway 82. There was a culvert that failed, a 60-inch culvert that carries Brush Creek under the highway that failed and caused a sinkhole about 15 feet by 15 feet deep. And so CDOT has kind of cordoned off the area and is hiring a contractor to fix it. So right now, safety is not a problem. The median's open, and they will close it eventually to fix the roadway. But it's the median between the up valley and down valley lanes.
Was it because of water flow underneath the culvert, or?
The culvert
pressure?
failed and caused
Floated
erosion.
around it, not from pressure from, I'm thinking, maybe truck traffic
No,
coming,
no,
okay,
it's purely water, hydraulic disposition of road base.
perfect.
That's interesting that that's happened today, because it hasn't rained.
I think it's been
Recently.
happening this spring. It's not unusual what we've seen in other areas where we've had drainage problems because of the additional water flow. So it's probably something that's just surfaced, but it's been. And Puerto Rico will certainly have
There.
culvert problems there too.
They're gonna have some too.
We can
Our
help Puerto
problems are
Rico
nothing
out, we'll
compared
get
to Puerto
CDOT to go
Rico's.
attend that.
Thanks for that. So that's the Smith Hill Road. That's an exciting thing. We'll have video at 5, no doubt,
Exactly
right?
Secondly, we were approached by the Aspen Global Change Institute to place a soil moisture station up Cooper Basin. So it's off of a Forest Service road that's closed to vehicular traffic, but the area they want to put it on is owned by the county general fund. It's an old mining claim. And this is not unusual. We've had these placed on open space. They have about 7 gauging stations around the county. We would allow that through a license and use agreement that staff could sign. We're working with the attorney's office now to complete that, but just wanted to check in with you to make sure you're okay with it. The two purposes would be to look at the dynamics between snowfall, soil, and then stream flow, and do some modeling so we can better anticipate what kind of stream flows we would have based on snow accumulation. So again, Aspen Global Change Institute would be managing it. We would have access to the data.
Didn't we recently do one?
Sure. How would they be accessing the location?
Yeah, over Cooper Basin Road, Forest Service Road, they would have to have a escort to get through the gate, either a county escort or a Forest Service escort. And then if they needed to go up there to service it in the future, they would have to, use a bicycle or walk. It's just over 4 miles up. The placement is such that you cannot see it from the road. It's down in a gully and is screened by trees.
Got it.
So
And it's on a mining claim, but it's not on a tailing or anything. It's just,
No.
we assume it's just regular, yeah.
it's,
We're going to
it's
monitor
native.
heavy metals.
Yeah, just wondering.
It's
yeah.
native soil, and but it's on a mining claim.
Got it. Great. Now, do you need an approval from us or just a heads up?
Just a heads up, and just to make sure that you're okay with us moving in that direction, then we can create the.
And this
use
is
and
part of their
licensing.
ongoing monitoring program. They've been doing soils and atmospheric monitoring, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. This is part of a bigger program, and again, we have access to the data, and maybe I've asked they could do a report to the board based on their findings in the future. So we'll have
That'd be
that
great.
coming.
Did we do one up at Ruby? Wasn't that the,
There's one up the Independence Pass,
Yeah.
for sure.
that's one up there, yeah. That was just recent.
Correct.
Right.
And you've got Kathy here next. Are we up, moving on to?
Talking trash.
Before you go, I did also want to say that the bears are big in people's minds right now, and bears at the landfill was one of the questions that came up to me today from a constituent who said, well, we understand there are a lot of bears out there. Have there been bear cullings out there? The rumors are swirling, so it'd be great if you have anything you can say about that, that'd be a good thing to put out there, or at least be prepared to at some point soon.
So when she comes in wearing a bear skin rug.
Right. How many
coat this
bears
winter?
have you had to?
Earlier this summer, we had probably 20 regulars that would
Wow,
come
more than I
down once
thought.
we closed, and then they skedaddle once we open in the morning. Haven't seen as many lately. I think the natural service berries are coming out up high, and you can really tell they prefer their natural food source rather than the landfill. And there have been no callings. We have not.
Good to know. In
That is not
recent
happening.
time, not in recent. Could you say the same for last year, or how far back can we go?
We there was an illegal hunting incident
That was yours.
2 years ago in Department of Wildlife, or CPW, what they called, caught the people, father and son from Indiana, and they did prosecute them.
Yeah, that was a
Right.
different
Remember
one.
that. That's the last time you've had that. Oh, that's good to know. Thanks.
Yeah, and in my 8 years here, I think we've had 2 incidents. Both of those have been dealt with. There is a process of, as necessary, hazing the wildlife so they don't become habituated to being around people.
And no problems with safety of our employees out there from the bears, because they kind of come in and go and
Yeah, we
different hours.
usually don't see them till we close and they come down. As John mentioned, occasionally some young ones early in the season will kind
A
of
little
roam
frisky.
on while we're open and get around people. We do have a shotgun with rubber pellets. We kind of pop them in the behind, and they learn very quick, and we don't see them usually again.
Leadville used to hold an event. They put up bleachers. People would go out at night and after, Leadville, their landfill. It's like the hot spot. It's
So
better
peop-
than watching Friday Night Football. You went and watch the Bears at the Leadville win.
So people should know this is not a public thing. We're trying to keep the bears separate from humans, just so they're not habituated. That's very important. That people don't assume that, hey, we're going to see a lot of bears if we go out to the landfill. We don't want that.
It's usually after we're closed and the gates are closed.
Gates are closed. Can't get there. Just give
come
them
look at
give them a
them, yeah.
wide berth.
Can't
give them a
get
wide
there
berth.
from here.
Okay. Thanks for that. All right.
And the update is, late last week, we had a complaint from 2 complaints from the Crystal River area about waste fees going up. So we want to give the board just some indication based on our new waste ordinance that was passed and what's going on from a pricing standpoint. So Kathy's done some research just to give you some data to respond to these questions as they come in, and we'll go from there.
And there was a really recent one from the Lower River Road area.
Yeah, that was the email one. We got an email and a call.
Good responses.
Yeah, so we've had 2, 16,000 residents. It's pretty good. Change is hard for people. So we looked into it, and we've been in contact with the waste hauling companies to make sure they're on track.
And the two larger waste hauling companies are going to have the biggest impact on this change. So Mountain Waste has streamlined their pricing to match the 3-container system, the 32-gallon, 64, and 96. So Mountain Waste, what they have done is everybody's getting the same pricing no matter where you're at in Pitkin County, I think, for the most part. So they've told me it's $30 for the 32-gallon, $60 for the 64-gallon, and $90 for the 96-gallon. And that matches the required price increments that we require. We cannot tell them what to set their pricing at. It's a free market system. We can just tell them the percentage they have to increase based on the size that they can. That they're implementing that. I think people are starting to get letters. They're a little behind schedule on getting all this sorted out, but people are starting to get letters, and I think that's what's generated the two complaints or questions that we had. Those were both Mountain Waste customers. And I encouraged both of them. I said, you can go to the smaller cans. If you divert more, if you compost more, and you can actually save money than what you were paying, because most everybody had the 96-gallon can. So you can, if you're going to divert, you can actually lower your trash bill from what it was previously. I did get a call from a woman up the Crystal River Valley. She did just that. She's like, I went to the 32-gallon can, and I'm saving more than from what I was doing before. And then she just had a question about recycling, so we answered that for her. I've been in touch with Waste Management. They're also the other large hauler. They haven't received any complaints locally. They are a national company, so their calls go to a national call center, and he said they have a whole division set up that works on all the waste ordinances that go on across the country. He said, but they haven't seen any cancellations or complaints in general. And then we're working with the smaller companies. Some of them are struggling a little bit getting on board and getting the pricing right.
George, go ahead.
So when I talked to this one person who was complaining that his rates had gone up about 100%, and I had told him that, well, you have these opportunities to use a smaller container, as well as change your frequency of pickup. Mm-hmm. And what he told me was, well, it was always the opportunity to have a different size container anyway and pick up. So I don't know if that's true or not.
The haulers, Waste Management, I know, has always offered the variable rate pricing for the most part, I think, in the valley. It's what they told me. Mountain Waste hasn't always given that option. They've really pretty much stuck with the 96-gallon rate. I think we're talking about the same gentleman. I asked him the same question. Did he consider going to a smaller can and recycling? And I said, was he given the option to go to a smaller can recycling? And he didn't really answer the question, but he said no. But I don't think that's true. I did touch base with Mountain Waste, who is this hauler, and they said yes, he got a letter and explaining what's different now and his options. So.
And you could still also change your level of service of frequency. Mm-hmm. that might reduce your mm-hmm. bill. And then because we're requiring recycling with trash pickup now, so if you're using a 32-gallon trash container, then your recycling container would be about 18 gallons. And so there's probably an increase in one's bill just with that.
Yeah, Mountain Waste indicated they are charging a flat rate of $15 a month to collect recycling.
15, oh, okay. So if you were paying normally $40 a month for your trash pickup, if you use your same size container, you may anticipate that going up to $65.
Mm-hmm. If he had the 64, we go to 60. If he'd had a 96, he did have a 96 before, and it went from 55 to 90. And that was just based on the Mountain Waste standard rate increases. And I also indicated we have a competitive marketplace for haulers in the valley that you might want to check with other haulers too to see what they're charging.
And recycling in Redstone is going to end when?
That ended in June.
That already ended in June, okay. And we still haven't heard if and when the Willits Mid-Valley will be closing or not?
We've had discussions with Basalt. Matter of fact, I had a call today with Basalt. Pickens County, we are proposing January 1, 2020, we end that. And they are looking at the same thing. They're trying to budget now. Do they want to keep it or without our support or move to other things? She did ask if we had some partnership opportunities. And we're looking at maybe perhaps having some incremental leaf and grass collection. They do it in the fall now, like 4 times in the fall they move to neighborhoods. Maybe expanding that to the summer to having a Saturday collection maybe 4 times throughout the summer that we could help with. We currently help them with their fall collection, so.
Yeah, you don't know whether, when you talk about partnerships, whether Basalt is having any discussions with Eagle County in terms of contributing to the Mid-Valley.
No, and they haven't, and she's suspecting, like we do, it's probably mostly Eagle and Garfield County using that Willett Center. And I told her, just given our experience with the contract rates going up, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, significantly, 113%. I expect probably in January when Waste Management looks at the pricing for the year again, it's going to go up as well significantly. So it's not going to be the usual consumer price index increase they've been giving us. So.
Mm-hmm. So to clarify again, even if you recycle on your own, like apparently this gentleman does, you still are going to be charged $15. It's a mandatory charge now.
Unless you submit an exemption form and have a good case for why.
So he could do that. So he knows that now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to make sure we're giving him all his options. He's a really nice guy. He's been in the Valley for a long time.
Yeah, we know.
So as long as, and he's smart, so as long as we give him all the options, he'll find a way, I think, to solve his problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's perfect.
Comments, questions?
Yeah, I guess, will you be able to report out after this has been going on for a while, the, additional new users of the recycling services?
Mm-hmm. So part of the ordinance requires the haulers to provide data to us. So by end of next March 2020, they will have to supply us with a report of how many customers, what number of customers are doing what size cans, how many are recycling.
Because ostensibly some were already paying for recycling services, and now everyone.
Right. So the haulers estimated probably before we went with this ordinance, 70 to 75% of people in the Pickens County already had curbside recycle service. So it's not going to be a huge change for most everybody. And to date, we've given 4 exemptions for the ordinance. So.
Can you say what was the basis for those exemptions?
Yeah, one was up in Thomasville, and they have a community trash dumpster. So to provide a community recycle dumpster was going to be an exorbitant cost. And it really, they presented the case, it's really not worth the bang for the buck. We're going to get enough tonnage to pay hundreds of dollars a month to haul recycling down to the landfill. Or to the transfer center at the recycle. We don't landfill recycling. The other 2, Redstone, they have a smaller hauler. They live on back roads with snow conditions. That the small hauler doesn't have a 4-wheel drive truck for the winter to get recycling pickup in there. So it's reasonable too. And then the 4th, I am drawing a blank on. It was a similar situation. Oh, it was Wildcat Ranch. They do boutique service, so what we call, they actually go into the garage and collect the recycling.
Do they rinse it and stack it?
They might. So I exempted them from the recycle portion of it since they go in and collect it. And I can verify they do bring it themselves to the landfill right next door. So.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to thank you for, one, your responsiveness when people have had a complaint or an issue. Usually, I think your responses have been really, really succinct and to the point and illuminating. And often what I see in the complaints is that they're not particularly informed, but they're afraid that some major changes come, and people tend to jump to conclusions a bit. I think the landfill and you in particular have handled that very well. People should know that if they take it to the recycling to the landfill, they're not going to be charged. Is that correct?
Correct. Residents
It's
can
free.
still bring
free.
Right,
Yeah.
you can still take it in for free, and you can actually save money on your trash bill.
Some can.
Some people can,
Yeah.
if you pay attention to what's going on. And lifestyle changes are not easy, but it's something we have to do. One, for the life of our landfill, the changes nationally and regionally in the recycling programs. And then also, we're going to be looking at, the bears aren't going away. They seem to be getting more abundant. And I'm guessing at some point you'll be back in our conversation on, how are we handling human-bear interaction? Because that's going to come back around, of course, with the city, the latest issues with bears. And it's not just a city issue; it happens in the county as well, as we know.
So I want to I'm going to add or ask, and maybe Brian knows the answer, or John. As part of our trash ordinance, bear ordinance, whatever you want to call it, didn't we put in there a 3-day in jail? If you are third strike, you're out to the humans who don't properly control their trash. I think there's a jail time in there, because the point is that people tend to just write the check. Oh, I violated again, I'll write a check. It goes into a fund that helps purchase bear-resistant trash cans. But I think we were looking at, they needed to add the language. I think legally we can do that, and I thought we did. So can we just follow up on that?
I will have to check on that.
And
I
it
know-
wasn't the property manager, it was the owner of the property who's responsible for the trash on their property. And if it's violated X amount of time and they're warned or ticketed, the third time they can serve 3 days in our beautiful Pickens County jail.
It's a much better deal than the bear gets.
Exactly. It's a
I'll-
death sentence.
I'll check that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
So we're going to
Don't
check
tell
on that
Joey
one.
that I just offered his jail for bear violators.
So much for his
but-
capacity.
Yeah.
Okay, next I think we have a basalt planning.
We still have open discussion though, don't we?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're
So
still
these
on
are
it.
just staff.
Okay.
These are
Staff
staff
updates.
updates.
I don't wanna
that
miss my
we
big
want-
points
coming
here.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
We'll get to you guys, right? Are we on
So
open
this
discussion?
is
or are
just
we
one of
talking
those
about
days
your
where we
thing?
had a number of things
still on open
pop up
discussion.
to update you guys on.
Yeah, thank you for squeezing us all in. I wanted to make you aware of a neighborhood meeting that the community development staff,
Can you introduce yourself, Ellen, for the?
Ellen Sassano, long-range planner.
Thought
Sorry
that was you.
about that. Yeah, so there was a neighborhood meeting that ComDev staff hosted with the town of Basalt. It was at the Basalt Library last night. Steve Child was there. Thank you, Steve, for participating. The purpose of the meeting was to open a dialogue with residents and business owners who are in the Highway 82 corridor between this end of Basalt and the old Snowmass Conoco. And really we were trying to work with them on how to approach this area moving forward from a land use and zoning standpoint. It's a different area than any of the surrounding rural caucus areas because it is along the highway. It's an interesting mix of residential, different densities of residential, commercial, light industrial land uses. So it's different in terms of its character. And so we got a great turnout at this meeting. 40 people or so, I think. And really good feedback, people talking about what's working there, what's not working there. And there's a lot of movement towards transition in terms of land use, and a lot of interest in working with the county on looking at a vision for the future in terms of zoning and land use in general. So we'll continue to work with the town of Basalt. They are going to incorporate this area as part of their 3-mile plan as they update their master plan. They are in process and hope to have their master plan updated by the end of the year. We'll also have a separate track. We're still working on exactly what the outcome will be on our end, but we're anticipating having a separate track and actually adopting a separate master plan for this specific area. And we'll have a longer time frame so that we can have more time to communicate with the public and get more feedback and come up with a good strategy for future land use here. So lots of great feedback. You all may get some phone calls. People had a lot of different perspectives, and if you do, feel free to forward them to either me or Cindy Hubin. And one last thing, we do have an online survey that is up that people can participate in if they would like to participate that way and give us feedback on the area. Of course, I don't have the website at my fingertips, but if anyone is interested, they can call either or contact me or Cindy, and we'll link them up. So just wanted you to be aware, and we'll keep you in the loop moving forward.
We started discussing this. It wasn't with the Hatanaka in their landscaping business. It was even prior to that with the use of the property where I think Soderbergh, is he the electric, where the DMV used to be 100 years ago.
Correct.
We started looking at that little business, industrial, commercial zoning there, and we started this discussion, it was many years ago, many years ago.
Yes.
And there still may be some file information on it somewhere. I don't think it really got very far, but that discussion started then, I think was brought up again during the landscaping discussion, and maybe even with the Silver Peak marijuana grow site. So there may be some history in there.
There's a lot of history on several properties in that area, and we continue to have a lot of interest in various land uses, including light industrial, landscaping, marijuana grows. It's a different mix along the highway there.
Steve?
I went to listen to people's concerns and read the sticky notes and all that. There is one public safety concern that I'd like to bring up right now that I wasn't aware of until yesterday. People who live at Lazy Glen, if they're turning towards Aspen on Highway 82, there is no acceleration lane there, and they are risking their lives trying to get up to speed to merge in with the traffic that's coming up the valley. There is a dirt grass median there that could be used to add an acceleration lane going towards Aspen. But
it's a CDOT request.
One resident who brought that up is very concerned. He thinks somebody's going to get killed there sooner or later, and I think that's something we should bring up with CDOT and get on our list of things to try to rectify.
We heard that from a lot of business owners and residents. Clearly, access onto and off of the highway there is challenging at best. It's a safety concern. Also, just general traffic in the Mid-Valley area and how that will relate to any future land use is something that will definitely be a part of the discussion. So CDOT will be involved moving forward for sure on the safety aspect. And there are a lot of interesting pieces and parts to deal with there.
Great. Anything else, Kelly?
What's the next steps in this planning conversation?
The next steps will be first to distill the information we received at the meeting last night, and also the survey. I'm not quite sure how long the survey will be up, but we'll wait. Once it closes, we'll also gather that feedback, and we're still formulating a plan for moving forward. But we'll continue to coordinate with the town of Basalt, because this is the front door to their town. And so we'll probably participate with them in wrapping up their Basalt Master Plan update, with this being part of their 3-mile planning area. But we're anticipating having a lot more public meetings, perhaps working individually with some property owners who are interested in working that way, but also holding some more public meetings. And then we're still working on exactly how we'll continue the public outreach, but we'll do that until we feel as though we've really gotten what we need in terms of feedback, and then we'll look at most likely formulating a separate master plan for this area that Pickens County Planning Commission will adopt hopefully. And I don't know what time frame we're looking at yet. SALT's looking at adopting their plan by the end of the year. We're definitely going to be going out significantly further than that, so that there's so much interest in the area, and a lot of, this has been an area that's been talked about and changing probably for 30 years now, and people want to be involved in making some good change. So we're going to let it run its course, so that we make sure we're not shutting anybody down. But we at the same time, we'll want to get something done within a reasonable time frame. Maybe it'll be, I don't know, 6-month, 8-month, year-long process.
Thank you.
Can I have a request? So tomorrow, as part of open discussion, can you bring the survey website down so we can get it on
Yes.
grassroots, so people who might be listening can just get it there and not have to make the effort to call, because I think you might have better response that way.
Absolutely, yeah. I was racing down from the office and
So
didn't
if you
grab
just
it.
bring that down, we can introduce it tomorrow on Grassroots TV.
Okay,
Great. Thanks for catching that.
thank you. Yeah,
Thanks, Ellen. That's
Thank you,
sounds
Ellen.
great update.
good. Thank you.
Have a good afternoon. Thanks for coming in. Anything else for
I have one
open?
quick,
Go
because
ahead.
I know we need to get to the airport because of time frame, but as everyone saw in the newspaper today, there was an issue about the city wanting to create people wanting to create a city caucus to participate in county issues. And as part of my being interviewed by the local paper, I said I would bring this back to the board. Apparently, Tory has talked to individuals on this board about it. Oh,
During his campaign, he did.
no, he said he had reached out and talked.
He did mention it to me real briefly at
Okay.
some thing where we were all there.
Well, I don't know how far it's going to go, but I think it might be a valuable discussion for us to have it sometime to see maybe at a joint meeting do we have a joint meeting coming up with the city? I don't know, because I don't know who would be creating it, if it's citizen driven or if
Well,
it's government driven.
Would you like me to go through the process real quick of creating a caucus, or? would you
No,
want
I
in
think
the
that not
future?
today, but I think
Okay.
we do
Do it
need to
another
have the
time.
discussion to see if we want to, what we want to do with this, because it's apparently an issue that has got some traction in the city, and I think we need to be prepared for questions that are being asked of us, and what information we have to share, and what information whoever wants to organize this has to share back.
Well, and I think this circles back to a conversation we've had about building better relationships between the city and the county, at least as boards, so that to me kind of highlights that let's put some intentional energy, I think, around that conversation. But beyond what was reported as focusing on the airport, I think we would need to think about what topics would have the longevity that would justify a caucus forming. And to me, this kind of just opens up the door to say, great, because there's a lot of things I'd like to weigh on from a county perspective for what the city is deciding to do as well.
Well, we have a lot of county constituents that are in unincorporated Pickens County who are directly impacted by decisions made in the city and may feel that they don't have a voice. So what are we opening up here? Where do we want to go with it? And makes you want to take a deep breath.
I think it's important. This was not an action of the city council. It is being discussed amongst citizens, which is what's anticipated of the formation of a caucus. But we can go through that at a future date. It's a fairly open process.
Well, we went through it with the subdivision and creation of the 2 snowmass caucuses, but this is a whole new ballgame, and I'm not sure what our mandatory requirements are through state statute as far as having citizens caucuses and funding them, and where do we draw the boundaries, and what's already in a caucus and what's not in a caucus.
All good questions.
I'm happy to talk to
I'll make a
some of those,
list
but
for
we
you.
can, we can
We'll do
talk
it
to
in-
them in the future.
I would just say, I just think that who is floating this idea really doesn't understand the purpose of a caucus and how it's structured. So probably a little educational would go a long ways to some folks.
Steve?
I remember when Tori was mentioning it to me, I had the impression he was talking about a caucus that would advise the city council, that it wasn't to advise us. That was my impression from Tori.
I know what I got was one of the focal points being the airport, that it was a City of Aspen Citizens Caucus to advise the county on airport issues, but also possibly transportation and development and, you know, on and on and on. So I don't know. Yeah.
I think it's certainly worthy of a longer session.
So we could have a work session maybe.
And you know, public participation is good. Unintended consequences will be interesting to explore, and I look forward to that conversation. Okay, are we good with that one?
No, thank you.
I just had one short one. It's just the BOC was invited by a local nonprofit group called Friends of Africa to a program at the Wheeler tomorrow evening at 5:30 called African Twilight, which is some eminent authors and photographers and conservationists are doing a program, and if anybody's interested, Charlotte just wanted me to announce it. It's at 5:30, so we're probably all going to miss it.
I'll go for you.
Oh, Patty could go. Right, Patty can go. Charlotte just said she'd post it if she thought more than two of us were going.
I think it's an event we could just go to without posting.
You may be the only one who gets there on time if it does happen. So just wanted to bring that up. Okay, moving right along, we've got John Kinney waiting patiently.
In the wings, no pun intended.
Well, good afternoon. Members of the Board of County Commissioners, my name is John Kinney, Airport Director here at Aspen-Pitkin County Airport. About 6 months ago, maybe I guess actually about a year ago, there was a variety of citizens who were concerned about a lack of perceived transparency in terms of the curfew program and how noise complaints are handled. And we met with those folks, got some great ideas for them, implemented those ideas, and I think it made our program more responsive to them in terms of access to registering noise complaints and the webpage, and access to curfew violations or inquiring about curfew violations. So collectively, I think we have a stronger program than we did a year ago. So again, I thank those folks, mostly from the Woody Creek Caucus, who helped us improve that system. But to the commitment that we gave to them, as well as the Board of County Commissioners, we're going to come back to you on a quarterly basis and just give you an update of how many noise complaints we got, basically what they were about, and then also do we have any exemptions or curfew violations, and what were the actions associated with that. So pretty simple graph in a sense. The first quarter, you could see the number of curfew extensions and curfew exemptions that we had, and the curfew violations, and those status of those being processed, which they were, and then how many noise complaints we had in the first quarter of 2019. So kicking off now the second quarter of 2019, there were no extensions granted. There were 2 exemptions. There were 2 medical flights coming into the airport, one departing during that curfew period of time, and the other one not until after the fact. And then curfew violations, there were none. And in terms of noise complaints, during that period of time, we had 5. One inquiry was that there was a curfew violation, but reviewing the records, we did not see any activity. We reviewed not only the landing and takeoff logs, but also the software, FlightAware, that tracks aircraft coming into and out of every airport. But obviously, we're just concerned about ours. And then we also took a look at the airport cameras, and there was no activity. So was very likely just an overflight from point A to point B, and that person's house happened to be along that ground track. Another was an inquiry as to was there a late arrival, and it was about 12 minutes prior to the curfew. So even though it was late, it was still within the time frame that the Board of County Commissioners allows operations to take place out at the airport. Excuse me, in that first one where there was no airport activity, I bring that to your attention, but it did not go into the count of 5. So if you're counting how many I'm telling you about, it would come out to be 6. Excuse me. The next noise complaint was the frequency. They were very interested in actually asking, can we limit the number of operations at the airport? We cannot. We basically have a flow rate of approximately 32 an hour. That may go down to 2 an hour, all the way down to 1 hour an hour during inclement weather. And the most that we had was this summer, I believe, at 36 an hour, and that's just because aircraft were coming in at a faster speed. It was the highest flow rate per that 1 hour that the tower chief had seen in his 12-year history at the airport. So 32 is pretty much the planning baseline of pretty close to being the maximum flow rate into and out of this airport.
John, do you have a date?
We also had.
Do you have a date and time for that one? Just wondering, just out of interest, you have a date stamp and time stamp on that?
On the 36, they don't have a timestamp because it was all day.
Right. Thank you. Date stamp.
I don't on that one, based on these two documents, but I sure could get that for you.
Just be interesting
Like
to know
July
what
4th
hour was the 30, is it July 4th or Food and Wine, or I'm assuming it's some big event weekend, but I just wondering.
It was July 7th.
July 7th, okay.
Yeah, it was July 7th, but I don't know what,
Everybody leaving town.
what time of day it was.
Maybe so, yeah.
It was a very busy day because we looked at throughout the day, and it was pretty packed.
So it would have been a lot of commercial and GA.
Probably something with the Institute, maybe the Ideas Festival, or.
Oh, yeah, that would have been that time frame too.
Be kind of interesting to track that just to see where we're seeing the highest.
You're right, there is an hour.
Right, it's an hour, right? It's an hour time.
That's
so.
an hour time frame.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Rush hour, getting out of town.
They're coming into town. We don't know which way they're
Which
going.
way they're going.
They're coming and going.
Yeah.
Another call was for increased traffic over Meadowood. That's really wind-driven is what happens there. Some folks will call up and go, there's not a stitch of wind outside my window. I'm looking at the leaves. They're straight. But the instrumentation that the pilots use is almost 2 miles away, and it can be a very different situation. So it is much easier for them to land on runway 15 as opposed to land, come around town, and then land. It's just easier. So it's not a preference. It's strictly wind driven. Another one was, again, frequency, just the number of aircraft flying into and out of the airport. They thought that it was negatively impacting wildlife. Another, again, was just frequency, about 5 to 7 in a half-hour period. So pretty typical reasons why, and during peak periods of time, but that pretty much summarizes what we had going on at the airport for noise and curfew activities for the second quarter.
Great, thank you for that. Great to have those updates. I think it helps us understand, transparency is good, right?
Absolutely. So on the noise, if somebody gives us a time, we can maybe track tail numbers. Do we ever, and don't we do that and then issue letters to say it was, wing tail number X, Y, and Z, and we can track it back and say you're operating a noisy jet, please, be mindful.
Get a muffler.
Do we still do that?
Well, you sure could even today, and I wouldn't hesitate to ask staff to do that if the winds were calm and the aircraft came in on runway 33.
No, I'm talking noise.
What's that?
I'm talking noise. When the noisy plane takes off, somebody calls in a noise complaint, says, I'm just standing out at my house at W/J and this jet just came out and it was rattling my windows. They can call in, right, and report the time and the date.
Could.
And we used to, I thought, send letters and say.
We did when there were stage 1 and stage 2
Okay.
aircraft, but now those
That's
have all
what
been
changed.
federally mandated to be retired, and they have. So really what you have is the latest and greatest technology flying into and out of the
So we have
Aspen
the
Airport.
occasional one that just either is flying in the different flight pattern or coming in low or taking off low or something that's just out of the norm.
Yeah, if it's out of the norm, we definitely would take note of that and can send those folks and would send those folks those type of letters.
I don't know if that's necessary at this point. But I don't know how the rest of the board feels. But I just remember when we did that, but that was definitely when we had the stage 1 and 2s.
Right.
That were significantly noisy.
Well, there's a prop plane. We know that unique prop plane that's fairly noisy that comes and goes, and they generated complaints for quite a while. And I think it makes sense. Yeah, if somebody's making a lot of noise, sounds like you can easily track them if it comes up. So
somebody calls with the time and say I'm standing at it and it's
Right.
13:00 minutes.
Then they can get the tail number, right? Okay, is that?
No, this was good information, and I really appreciate the efforts, especially with curfew issues.
You bet.
Any questions?
Not a question, more a comment. As we go into the future, there will be more electric airplanes and hybrid electric airplanes. I think noise is no longer going to be an issue. Now, when the curfew was put in place, I presume it was largely because of the noise from the aircraft, but was it also just because of the lights of the planes coming into landing, or was it strictly driven by the noise concern?
I don't know. I've never seen documentation as to why, but a guesstimate is noise.
Probably the noise. So in the future, there might be a future Board of County Commissioners eliminating the curfew because all the airplanes are so quiet that the noise is no longer an issue.
When every
And that would
airplane
be a
is
wonderful
electric,
day
we'll
if we
consider
could get
that.
to that.
I don't think so, Steve.
I think it's a couple things to note there. One, it's actually within a congressional act, and so it's not within the commissioner's sole authority to change that curfew. And I think the community, I mean, based on the conversations that we're having in the community right now, I think that the concerns go, noise is definitely a concern, emissions are a concern, but I think there are additional concerns that the community probably benefits from the curfew on. So I think that would be a broader conversation and would require literally an act of Congress to remove that.
Certainly,
curfew.
if I can see the point of a community concern if you had planes coming at 1 o'clock and then people had to be providing ground transportation for them, for instance. That would totally impact the people who service the airport, which I can see that we would maybe not want to go there. Let's shut the airport at 11 and everybody can go home and get a good night's sleep.
John, we actually have one of the few airports in the country that has actually a variance that allows a curfew. And what I understand is that if we were to eliminate that curfew, we would never get that back.
Or change it. Right.
Or make modifications to it, correct, George?
So,
Right.
yeah, I don't see this
we wanna
community,
mess with
I don't
that.
think we want to screw around with the curfew at all.
And by the time all planes are electric, I'm not sure who will still be in this room.
Aloysius.
I'll
Aloysius?
be here.
I'm not even sure
You know,
Aloysius will still be
I think
in
what's interesting is
He'll
we-
really be sleeping
I
in
did
it.
say a future board of,
Yeah.
not the current board.
He'll be completely trained in the process, I'm sure. But, and also, honestly, an electric aircraft isn't necessarily silent as much as we'd like it to think it is.
We still are going to make some noise.
Listen to the sound of a drone and tell me, I thought they were going to be silent too. So, okay, is that it? Any more? Thanks for coming in.
John.
Very
You bet.
informative.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll see you again soon. Thank you. And are we finished? Is there anything else that needs to be? Doesn't seem like it. We went out of our special meeting of the Board of Social Services, so I can just say we're adjourning.
Can I say one quick thing?
Yeah.
At the ACRA meeting today, there was a presentation of the city's new housing projects. It was very interesting. The one up on Park Circle, not the private partnership one, but the city's little one on Park Circle, the one at 7th Street and Main Street, Burlingame, the BMC West or the Lumberyard, which I thought was very interesting. They were talking about maybe doing a whole master plan for the ABC as part of their housing issues out there. The city was. This is coming from the city planners who are hired to do these projects. So it may at some point be a presentation we might want to hear.
Yeah, and just we have started conversations at the staff level about would it be possible to coordinate some type of area planning effort in the ABC, because you have CMC talking about
North 40.
projects, you have the
The fires.
city. We've got a small project on the other side of the highway that we're talking about. And really, it does kind of beg, I think, a broader conversation. Everyone's at different stages. And so, just so you know, we did initiate that conversation at the staff level to see if there was something we could pull together and then bring back to each of our bodies. We haven't brought it to you yet because we haven't gotten synced up. We've just had
Okay.
one meeting.
And just after this
we agreed
presentation
to
today.
kind of lay out a process and then come back together, see if it's feasible, and then we'd bring that back to the board. So we are in those conversations.
Thank you.
Yep.
Right, one last thing I wanted to say is just regarding for tomorrow's meeting, if anybody's listening, planning to come tomorrow, items 6 and 7 are continued as it says on the agenda. Just want to make sure people understand that in case they wanted to come in and make a comment on these items, we're going to continue them. But just thought I'll give a heads up.
Just one more thing. I'm sorry. I'm going to give you guys all, we have flyers, but just for the public, we are having a ribbon cutting Monday, September 9th at 5 p.m. for the ambulance facility.
I'm gonna make it back for
invite
that.
the public to be there. We're going to have a barbecue. There's going to be tours. We are distributing this information in the neighborhoods to be sure we have an opportunity to thank the neighbors for their patience throughout the construction process.
And no 911 calls during that time frame?
We always hope for no 911 calls, but we'll be prepared to answer
Okay.
them. So I'll just
Okay,
hand this
right.
out to you guys.
Great, thank you. All right,
Thank you.
Grassroots, thank you. I think we're done for the day.
Thanks, Grassroots.